1, 2, 3. Доброго дня. Хотілося б звернутися до україномовних спікерів і слухачів сьогоднішньої конференції з приводу мовних налаштувань, які будуть сьогодні у нас застосовуватися. У зв'язку з тим, що застосунок Zoom не розпізнає українську мову, її функції сьогодні буде виконувати німецькомовний канал. Тобто під час своєї доповіді або під час прослуховування перекладу вам потрібно буде в мовних налаштуваннях обрати німецьку мову. Якщо ви побачите на нижній панелі, у вас є можливість на вкладці «Додатково», або якщо ви це з телефону, або на вкладці «Переклад», якщо ви сидите з персонального комп'ютера, ви можете обрати німецький канал, натиснути «Готово» для того, щоб Zoom сприйняв зміни, які ви вносите в мовні налаштування, і прослуховувати україномовний канал. Дякую за увагу. Один, два. Dear participants, let me remind you about the language settings briefly. The speaker should choose the language according to the language they speak. That is, if you speak English, you choose the English button. Si vous parlez français, vous devez choisir français, and so on and so forth. Otherwise, interpreters won't be able to hear you. The same applies to the translation needed. If you need English translation, choose English, and so on. After you have selected the language, be sure to press the button Done.
Can the interpreters hear me? Greetings. Thank you.
Dear participants, let me once again briefly remind you about language settings. The speakers should choose the language according to the language they speak. That is, if you speak English, you choose the English button. Si vous parlez français, vous devez choisir français, and so on and so forth. Otherwise, interpreters won't be able to hear you. The same applies to the translation needed. If you need English translation, choose English, and so on. After you have selected the language, be sure to press the button Done. If desirable, you can also switch off or mute the original language. Dear participants, we're about to start.
Dear ladies and gentlemen, let's start. So I'm Darina Nedzelska, member of the International Division Team of the National Kiev-Pechersk Historical and Cultural Reserve, acting focal point for World Heritage and member of the National Commission of Ukraine for UNESCO. I would like to welcome you on the International Scientific and Practical Online Conference, World Heritage Sites, Sustainable Development Practices for Urban Heritage. Our event is dedicated to the 13th anniversary of the inscription of the World Heritage Property Kiev St. Sofia Cathedral and related monastic buildings, Kiev-Pechersk Lavra, on UNESCO World Heritage List. The conference is organized by the Ministry of Culture and Informational Policy of Ukraine, National Kiev-Pechersk Historical and Cultural Reserve, in cooperation with UNESCO World Heritage Center and under the auspices of the National Commission of Ukraine for UNESCO. So before we start working, dear speakers, please pay attention to the time limit. And we are glad to give the floor to the Deputy Director of the UNESCO World Heritage Center, Dr. Jody Hasagrah. Please, Mrs. Dr. Hasagrah, the floor is yours.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Good morning to everybody. Dear Ms. Svetlana Fomenko, Deputy Minister of Culture and Information Policy of Ukraine. Dear Ms. Min Zepa, First Deputy Minister for Foreign Affairs of Ukraine and Chairperson of National Commission of Ukraine for UNESCO. Mr. Alexander Rudnik, Acting Director General of the National Kiev Pechersk Historical and Cultural Reserve, and Ms. Nelia Kukovalka, Director General of the National Conservation Area, St. Sofia of Kiev. Thank you very much for organizing this event. Felicitations to you from the World Heritage Center. I bring greetings from the director, Ms. Mechel Rossler, and we're very pleased to felicitate you on the 30th anniversary of the World Heritage Site of Kiev, of St. Sofia Cathedral and related monastic buildings, Kiev-Pechersk Lavra. Thank you for organizing also this international conference on sustainability of World Heritage, on World Heritage Sites, Sustainable Development Practices for Urban Heritage, which is extremely timely and a valuable topic. We very much look forward also to a continuation of this next in 2021. The site of Kiev, St. Sofia Cathedral and the related monastic buildings, Kiev-Pechersk Lavra, was inscribed in the World Heritage List in the year 1990 under criteria 1, 2, 3, and 4. These architectural complexes have outstanding universal value as a masterpiece of human creative genius in its architectural decoration, the result of cultural interaction of the Kievan Rus Byzantine Empire and Western Europe, testimony to centuries-old Byzantine cultural traditions. At the same time, the listing states that St. Sofia Cathedral is a unique edifice representative of church warden order, and Kiev-Pechersk Lavra is an exceptional ensemble formed over almost 9 centuries, which reflects changes in the stylistic trends in architecture. The spiritual and intellectual influence of Kiev-Pechersk Lavra contributed to the spread of Orthodox thought and the Orthodox faith in the region in the 17th to the 19th century. Thank you again for this organizing this conference, and all best wishes to you from the World Heritage Center. Thank you.
Thank you very much, dear Mrs. Deputy Director of the World Heritage Center. Unfortunately, Mrs. Svetlana Fomenko, Deputy Minister of Culture and Information Policy of Ukraine, she's a little bit retained, and so we will hear her welcome address later. And I'm pleased to give the floor to Mrs. Emine Japar, First Deputy Minister of Foreign Affairs of Ukraine, Chairperson of the National Commission of Ukraine for UNESCO. Please, the floor is yours.
Пані Дарино, наскільки я розумію, переклад нам забезпечено, правильно? Тому я, з вашого дозволу, буду говорити державною мовою. І перш за все хочу привітати всіх учасників цієї конференції. Хочу привітати і подякувати представникам Центру Всесвітньої спадщини ЮНЕСКО. Ми дуже задоволені нашою співпрацею з центром. І для нас сьогодні питання діяльності, наприклад, Національної комісії у справах ЮНЕСКО є пріоритетом для вищого керівництва держави. І я трошки розкажу про те, де ми зараз є в рамках діяльності комісії. Let me also thank you, Madam Jody, for your remarks. We hope that our cooperation with the will be very good. Beautiful results, as protection of cultural heritage of Ukraine is a very acute issue, both for the Ukrainian state and for the leadership and the National Commission of UNESCO. Отже, як голова Національної комісії, звертаючись до учасників конференції, зараз з точки зору цієї реформи, ми вважаємо, що реформою Національної комісії ми забезпечуємо більшу динаміку і оперативність, і, зокрема, можливість швидше реалізовувати проекти. На жаль, я для себе виявила, як голова комісії, що в нас не було чіткої, зрозумілої структури діяльності цієї комісії, і ми в цій реформі використали найкращі практики і користувались тими гайдлайнсами, тими фактично вказівками самої ЮНЕСКО, штаб-квартири ЮНЕСКО, і зараз в процесі погодження з усіма учасниками Національної комісії по структурі цієї реформи, по її діяльності, по її пріоритетах. Ми підсилили трошки секретаріат комісії, зокрема розширили штат секретаріату і відділу ЮНЕСКО, який оперує в системі Міністерства закордонних справ, з однією метою для того, щоб ця робота була більш ефективною. Наша задача полягає в наступному. Ми хочемо почати з нового року розробляти стратегію діяльності Національної комісії у справах ЮНЕСКО, залучивши максимальну кількість експертів, експертного середовища, громадянського суспільства і громадських діячів, залучивши максимально Академію наук і всіх тих учасників, які проявять бажання долучитись до розробки цього документу. Тобто логіка дуже проста. Напрацювати за засадничий документ, а потім вже відповідно формувати план заходів на виконання цієї стратегії. І її результат є один. Для того, щоб Національна комісія могла не тільки декларативно існувати, але в тому числі демонструвати дуже конкретні практичні результати. І для нас, наприклад, включення, я думаю, що Світлана Фоменко про це трошки більше скаже, як одна з дуже активних учасниць цієї реформи, в тому числі, для нас важливо, аби об'єкти матеріальної і нематеріальної спадщини були включені до списку всесвітньої спадщини, і елементи нашої нематеріальної культури щороку так само були частиною всесвітньої нематеріальної спадщини. У нас наступного року буде розглядатись ОРНЕК, кримсько-татарський традиційний орнамент. Ми хочемо, щоб через рік це був культура приготування українського борщу, і далі так само рухатись, не збавляючи темпу. І завершуючи своє вітальне слово, скажу, що у нас цей рік для України є важливим, тому що ми розпочинаємо кампанію підготовки до виборів у виконавчу раду. Це фактично керівний орган ЮНЕСКО. І ми подали свою кандидатуру на період з 2021 року і дуже активно будемо долучатись до своєї боротьби до членства у виконавчій раді. І наостанок, нещодавно, враховуючи, що ковід нам надає можливості подорожувати, надає можливості ділитись нашою красою, а ми знаємо, що собор Святої Софії, Києво-Печерська лавра є визитівкою України, є частиною європейської цивілізації, але через обмеження в подорожах ми ініціювали разом з президентом України міжнародний флешмоб з нагоди відзначення 75-ї річниці системи ЮНЕСКО, як і всієї системи Організації Об'єднаних Націй. І ми зробили прекрасний відеоролик, де намагались показати красу України і об'єкти всесвітньої спадщини, в тому числі собор Святої Софії і Києво-Печерську лавру. І зараз будемо звертатись до всіх керівників національних комісій в країнах, і я цей лист вже підписала, а потім звертатись до фактично секретаріату ЮНЕСКО з тим, щоб цей флешмоб, відеопривітань від всіх країн став частиною офіційних святкувань. У нас вже є лист мадам Одрі Азулі, це генеральна директорка ЮНЕСКО, з подякою президенту України за те, що ми такий флешмоб ініціювали, і ми вже маємо одну країну, яка приєдналась до цього флешмобу, це Туреччина, і ми розраховуємо, що десятки країн стануть частиною таких святкувань в такому сучасному цифровому форматі. І завершуючи, бажаю плідної дискусії і цікавих висновків, які ми спробуємо врахувати, в тому числі в роботі Національної комісії у справах ЮНЕСКО. Дякую.
Thank you, Mrs. Deputy Minister. And we have with us Mrs. Svetlana Fomenko, Deputy Minister of Culture and Information Policy of Ukraine. And I'm pleased, Mrs. Fomenko, to give you the floor.
Дякую дуже. Мені дуже приємно брати участь в нашій конференції, яка нарешті відбулася, незважаючи на всі перешкоди, пов'язані із ковідними викликами і з іншими. Насправді Україна є державою багатою на культурну спадщину, матеріальну і нематеріальну. І нарешті...
Світлана, ми вас не чуємо. Може, мікрофончик треба включити?
Ні, все включено. А тепер чуєте?
Тепер не чуємо. У вас, да, у нас, у нас тут технічно, да, ми не були підготовлені. Вибачте, будь ласка. Чути, да, ми не чуємо.
Пані Світлано, просимо вас в перекладі обрати німецькомовний канал, аби вас всі могли чути. Будь ласка, в налаштуваннях оберіть німецькомовний канал, тоді вас буде чути.
Зараз.
Ви то чуєте, а ми не чуємо.
Якщо ви з телефону, натисніть на 3 крапки більше та оберіть німецькомовний канал, підтвердіть свою дію, натисніть «Готово».
Так, чути?
Супер. Дякуємо.
Дуже дякую. Знову ще раз хочу привітати всіх учасників нашої конференції. Дуже рада, що нарешті вона відбулася, незалежності від всіх викликів, які ми маємо, пов'язаних з ковідним локдауном і з іншими об'єктивними причинами. І нам дуже пощастило, ми з вами живемо в країні багатою на культурну спадщину, як матеріальну, так і нематеріальну. Майже 170 тисяч пам'яток знаходяться на території України. 65 історико-культурних заповідників, і всім чудово відомо, що 6 об'єктів внесених до переліку, до списку всесвітньої спадщини людства. Але, на жаль, дуже нещодавно ми почали дійсно усвідомлювати, наскільки для нас ціннісна є спадщина, наскільки це може стати ресурсом і економічним, і соціальним для розвитку нашої країни. Ми постійно над цим працюємо, і думаю, що така конференція, вона ще раз підсвітить, і зробить фокусування на важливості, надзвичайній важливості спадщини і безповоротності її втрати. Ми активно зараз працюємо над новими номінаціями для внесення до переліку ЮНЕСКО, а також переглядаємо попередній перелік, який формувався багато років і який дійсно вже є неактуальним. І я хотіла би, щоб учасники конференції в тому числі зосередилися на цих нових підходах ЮНЕСКО до таких оновлених, більш всеохоплюючих критеріїв, за якими об'єкти мають універсальну цінність. Так само хотіла сказати, що ми дуже очікуємо на наступну сесію, яка, на жаль, в цьому році не відбулася, оскільки маємо надію, що нарешті будуть зняті всі такі негативні висновки, які стосуються об'єкту собор Святої Софії та Києво-Печерська лавра, оскільки в лютому буквально цього року ми мали моніторингову місію ЮНЕСКО, маємо звіт за результатами цієї місії і маємо значне поліпшення ситуації навколо цього об'єкту. Але разом з тим теж хотіла сказати, як важко іноді доводити або відстоювати, адвокувати питання спадщини, коли ми з вами, коли говоримо про міську спадщину, про міське середовище, ми розуміємо деякі фактори, які дуже сильно на це впливають. Це агресивна будівельна політика, на жаль, ефемізм в цих визначених, це називається розвитком міста, безповоротна шкода об'єктам під час такої забудови, дисонансні домінуючі будівлі, які візуально несуть втрати такої цілісності та автентичності пам'яток. І над цим всім нам треба працювати і в рамках законодавчого поля, і в рамках такого поля свідомості, громадянської свідомості, оскільки саме способі міністерства або керівництва заповіднику того чи іншого не може подолати таку проблему. Це громада має усвідомлювати ці загрози і ризики і з ними боротися. Також хотіла сказати, що в цьому році ми затвердили нову буферну зону об'єкту і Святої Софії Лаври. Сподіваємося, що на наступній сесії вона все ж таки буде розглянута. І на шляху до такого затвердження інші українські об'єкти внесені до переліку ЮНЕСКО. Тобто роботи багато, і тільки разом ми можемо її зробити, тому всім бажаю натхнення і хороших результатів. Дякую.
Thank you very much, Mrs. Deputy Minister. And it's my pleasure to switch the floor to the site managers of the properties components to present their addresses. And the floor is given to Mr. Alexander Rudnik, Active Director General of the National Kyiv-Pечерsk Historical and Cultural Reserve.
Шановні учасники конференції, щиро вітаю всіх, в першу чергу, з відкриттям міжнародної науково-практичної онлайн-конференції «Об'єкти всесвітньої спадщини. Практики сталого розвитку міської спадщини». Знаєте, майже вимушений буду повторити слово пані Світлани Фоменко. Дійсно, сьогодні наш захід є особливим, оскільки його присвячено 30-й річниці включення об'єкту до списку всесвітньої спадщини ЮНЕСКО, і відзначаючи цей ювілей першого українського об'єкту всесвітнього значення, і підводимо підсумки того, що важливо було зроблено для покращення збереження унікальної перлини культурної спадщини, а також як ми маємо працювати надалі, щоб забезпечити подальше надійне управління пам'яткою і її охорону згідно рекомендацій Комітету всесвітньої спадщини ЮНЕСКО. Сьогодні виконання цих завдань, дійсно, як сказала пані Світлана, ускладнюється з огляду на чисельні загрози екологічного, соціально-економічного і навіть політичного спрямування, яким під час дуже складно протистояти. Крім того, на тлі суттєвого прискорення процесів урбанізації, агресивного зростання міського простору, інколи відсутності зваженої містобудівної політики, надійне та стале збереження об'єктів культурної спадщини як елементу історичного міського ландшафту набуває ключового значення. Окремо хотілося б зазначити, що і пандемія, яка коронавірусна інфекція, яка стала головним викликом для всіх напрямків діяльності людства, в тому числі збереження культурної спадщини у поточному році. Разом з тим, незважаючи на проблеми сьогодення, ми з оптимізмом дивимося в майбутнє, розробляємо інноваційні підходи у діяльності українського об'єкту всесвітнього значення, які б забезпечили його адаптацію до нових і складних умов існування. Хотілося б також зазначити, що за останні роки завдяки плідній тісній співпраці з Центром всесвітньої спадщини та експертами КОМОС було зроблено важливі кроки у забезпеченні збереження визначної універсальної цінності об'єкта. Зокрема, встановлена і затверджена на національному рівні об'єднана буферна зона з диференційованими режимами її використання, яка очікується до затвердження на 44-й сесії Комітету всесвітньої спадщини ЮНЕСКО. Крім того, триває робота над фіналізацією плану управління об'єктом на засадах збалансованого та ефективного управління та відкритої комунікації всіх учасників. Ще хотілося б зазначити, шановні учасники та гості нашої конференції, що сьогодні є це такий шанс і можливість обговорити новітні методи та успішні національні та міжнародні практики збереження об'єктів всесвітньої спадщини, умови їх комфортного існування у рамках процвітаючих і життєздатних міст, а також використання культурних пам'яток як ресурсів сталого розвитку. Переконаний, що дискусія під час конференції буде плідною, а досвід, який кожен з учасників заходу отримає за результатами його роботи, сприятиме покращенню існуючих та виробленню дієвих інструментів управління об'єктами культурної спадщини. Тому ще раз запрошую усіх учасників конференції та гостей до роботи. Дякую за увагу і сподіваюся на плідну роботу під час конференції. Дякую.
Thank you very much. I am pleased to give the floor to Mrs. Nelia Kukovalska, Director General of the National Conservation Area, St. Sofia of Kyiv. Please, the floor is yours.
Шановні друзі, щиро вітаю учасників міжнародної конференції. У ці дні ми відзначаємо ювілей – 30-річчя від дня внесення нашої пам'ятки до списку об'єктів всесвітньої спадщини ЮНЕСКО. Це було великою честю для нас і визнанням культурної, історичної, архітектурної, мистецької та містобудівної цінності нашої пам'ятки. Ми долучилися до великої родини найкращих світових об'єктів, які створило людство за весь період свого існування. Ми були першими з українських пам'яток. Найдавніші складові нашого об'єкта – собор Святої Софії Премудрості Божої та середньовічні споруди Києво-Печерської лаври впродовж понад 1000 років були серцевиною, осердям Руси України, слугували символом її духовної ваги у світі, відправною точкою нашої європейської спорідненості і тісної взаємодії з усім християнським світом. Спільно з будівлями пізніх часів, вони й досі є символами нашої держави, культурними та духовними центрами, де відбуваються найвизначніші події та продовжує творитися історія. Будучи 30 років визнаними ЮНЕСКО і перебуваючи під його протекторатом, ми отримали додаткові можливості для розвитку, захисту нашої унікальної пам'ятки, для її належної охорони і популяризації в світі. За підтримки комітету ми й надалі плануємо здійснювати ряд важливих проєктів. Зокрема, завдяки міжнародній допомозі фонду, схваленої ще 2018 року, ми сподіваємося модернізувати систему гідрогеологічного моніторингу на території ансамблю будівель собору Святої Софії та Києво-Печерської лаври. Ми також дуже віримо, що й інші наші цінні об'єкти – Кирилівська церква, шедевр архітектури та монументального мистецтва XII століття, Андріївська церква, перлина бароко XVIII століття авторства знаменитого італійського архітектора Франческо Бартоломео Растреллі, які наразі належать до попереднього списку, розширять номінацію. Отож, ще раз вітаю учасників міжнародної конференції та висловлюю щиру подяку комітету за невтомну і постійну підтримку, за професіоналізм його команди, за грандіозні зусилля, завдяки яким багато пам'яток у світі отримало визнання, протекторат, захист і натхнення для подальшого розвитку. Дякую.
Thank you very much. And to close our opening session, I give the floor to Mikhailo Fedorin, who will say a welcome address on behalf of Mr. Alexander Nikolak, Director of the Department for Cultural Heritage Protection of the Kyiv City State Administration. Please, you are welcome.
Доброго дня. Я зачитаю вітальне слово Олександра Никаряка, директора Департаменту охорони культурної спадщини. Я Михайло Федорин, був генерального директора Київського науково-методичного центру охорони пам'яток. Отак, шановні колеги, маю честь вітати вас на відкритті міжнародної науково-практичної конференції «Об'єкти всесвітньої спадщини. Практики сталого розвитку міської спадщини». Культурна спадщина нашої столиці є невід'ємною частиною культурного надбання України, а відтак і світового культурного надбання. У місті Києві розроблено дякую. У місті Києві розроблена та впроваджується в життя міська цільова програма охорони та збереження культурної спадщини на 2019-2021 роки. Прийнята ця програма Київською міською радою у 2018 році. І вона спрямована реалізація стратегічної цілі збереження історичної самобутності та розвиток культури у місті Києві, стратегії розвитку міста Києва до 2025 року. Та ґрунтується на програмі економічного і соціального розвитку міста Києва, державній стратегії регіонального розвитку і на окремих положеннях стратегії сталого розвитку Україна 2020. Для аналізу існуючих у місті проблем при розробці програми та подальшої оцінки впливу результатів її виконання на сталий розвиток міської громади використовувалися методологічні рекомендації ЮНЕСКО, індикатори впливу культури на сталий розвиток, а саме індикатор стійкість спадщини. Програма створена для проведення перевірки стану інвентаризації об'єктів культурної спадщини з метою швидкого реагування на різноманітні загрози для об'єктів культурної спадщини щодо їх збереження. Програма призначена для визначення найбільш цінних пам'яток, їх реставрації та пристосування до подальшого залучення до міських, національних та міжнародних туристичних маршрутів, а також для представлення об'єктів в єдиній інформаційній базі об'єктів культурної спадщини міста Києва та здійснення заходів з їх популяризації, визначення їхніх охоронних зон та режимів використання, виготовлення облікової документації для занесення об'єктів культурної спадщини до Державного реєстру нерухомих пам'яток України та інших заходів. Метою програми є створення умов для збереження історичної самобутності Києва, формування принципів та механізмів столичної пам'яткоохоронної політики, охорони та збереження об'єктів культурної спадщини міста і їх популяризація. Колеги, бажаю плідної роботи учасникам конференції.
Thank you very much. Let's move to the introductory session, which will be opened by the keynote speech of Dr. Jody Hasagrah on the topic of urban heritage, sustainable development, and the historic urban landscape approach. Please, the floor is yours.
Thank you. Thank you very much. I will just try to switch to my presentation. Just 1 second. I will bring it up.
Shall we do it for you?
I think I have it.
Oh.
Oh, just 1 minute. Sorry.
Mm-hmm. Jody, we can do it from our end. If you don't, oh, it's okay.
I got it.
Okay, perfect.
Yeah. Thank you. Okay, thank you very much. I really appreciate taking the floor for the second time this morning, and thank you very much for the words of all of those who have spoken this morning. Indeed, the role of cultural heritage for sustainable development is very key. It's an important resource, particularly in cities. And as some of the speakers this morning have pointed out, in looking at how cultural heritage, urban heritage in particular, can be integrated into the sustainable development of urban areas. So I'm going to talk a little bit on this today. And as you know very well, and as we have heard already this morning about Kiev, Sofia Cathedral and related monastic buildings of Kiev, Peshers, Lavra, and as we have heard also about some of the concerns that have been coming up recently, I think that it's important to mention that to support the future of the site, the World Heritage Center and its advisory bodies encourage a continuous, fruitful dialogue with all stakeholders to tackle the burdens the site faces, considering the rapid evolution of its urban environment. This includes the reactive monitoring missions and ICOMOS technical reviews, such as the latest joint mission in February 2020. We'd like to encourage the implementation of recommendations of this mission and the ICOMOS technical reviews, 3 construction and reconstruction projects that have been reviewed, and to preserve the values of the property. I want to talk a little bit now about, more generally, about some of the ways in which we could look at how we approach sustainable development. I think we have 3 key entry points. One is through conservation and safeguarding of the World Heritage properties themselves, which is directly addressing the target, the SDG target of 11.4.1, or the 11.4, which is really on the conservation, the preservation of cultural and natural heritage. But we can also look at it from the perspective of the 2011 Unesco recommendation on the historic urban landscape. This recommendation is particularly interesting in looking at the integration of urban development with heritage conservation as a solution for sustainable development, and also in integrating the new urban agenda very closely. And the third end point, of course, is to look directly at the 2030 agenda and the new urban agenda and look at ways for taking actions towards those. Now, I know that all the experts here are very familiar, but just in case there are also participants who are less familiar with some of these, I just want to recall a couple of things about the outstanding universal value. So if you will allow me, the outstanding universal value means cultural and or that could be of cultural and or natural significance that is so exceptional as to transcend national boundaries and to be of common importance for present future generations of all humanity. And as such, the permanent protection of this heritage is one of the highest importance to the international community as a whole. The committee defines the criteria for the inscription of the properties on the World Heritage List. So, and again, as many of you are very familiar with these, this particular image and these points, the outstanding universal value has 3 main pillars, which is, of course, that it continues to meet the criteria. The criteria, for example, as I just mentioned earlier for Kiev, that it continues also that the conditions of integrity and authenticity continue to be met, and that the protection and management continues to be support the protection of the outstanding universal values. And as soon as any one of these pillars lapses, of course, and in particular, the protection and management does not support fully, then the system itself for safeguarding fails. And this is very important to recall here. I want to talk a little bit now about the recommendation on the historic urban landscape that is also called the whole recommendation. The recommendation was adopted on the 10th of November 2011 at the 36th session of the General Conference. And it is what we consider a soft law to be implemented by member states on a voluntary basis, and an additional tool to integrate policies and practices of conservation of the built environment into the wider goals of urban development with respect to the inherited values and traditions of different cultural contexts. So it applies to all historic cities, not only to World Heritage sites. But what is important in World Heritage sites is that the urban development must happen, the wider goals of urban development must happen with respect to the protection of the outstanding universal value. The recommendation on the historic urban landscape defines the historic urban landscape as the area that's understood as a result of historic layering of cultural and natural values and attributes extending beyond the notion of a historic center or ensemble to include the broader urban context and its geographical setting. This wider context includes notably the site's topography, geomorphology, hydrology and natural features, its built environment, both historic and contemporary, its infrastructure above and below ground, its open spaces and gardens, its land use patterns and spatial organization, perceptions and visual relationships, as well as all other elements of the urban structure. It also includes social and cultural practices and values, economic processes, and the intangible social and the intangible dimensions of heritage as related to diversity and identity. UNESCO's approach to managing historic urban landscape is holistic by integrating the goals of urban heritage conservation and those of social and economic development. This method sees urban heritage as a social, cultural, and economic resource for the development of cities. So, what is the whole approach? Because we tend to speak about it as an approach, the historic urban landscape approach. The whole approach looks at historic areas as composed of layers of history, economic, social, and spatial relationships between the built heritage, natural environment, and local communities. These layers include natural and cultural, tangible and intangible, universal and local heritage values present in any city. These heritage values should be taken as a point of departure in the overall management and development of the city. So in a sense, what I'm talking about is at one level, you have the universal, outstanding universal value, which is already defined, and that's what the site is inscribed for in the case of World Heritage properties. But then also the attributes of local attributes of urban heritage identity, which need to be identified and need to be protected in order to ensure the continued protection of the conditions of authenticity and integrity. And this needs to be integrated into the management of the urban areas as well. The layers of value and history are also reflected in the physical layers. The stratigraphy of the place, in a sense, archaeology allows us to interpret layers of the city and to do a diachronic reading, which is a reading over time. Indeed, archaeological remains are fundamental to the understanding of a place. They are presence that need to be managed and made compatible to the contemporary needs and aspirations. So when you're talking about archaeology, we're not just talking about ancient remains, but really of the idea that there is layer of history over time. And that's what we want to be able to, in a sense, excavate and present these multiple layers, which could be very recent, not talking necessarily of ancient archaeological remains. Therefore, the whole approach creates a shift in focus from monuments to the urban fabric as a whole and beyond notion, and goes beyond the notion of the historic center. And at the same time, this understanding considers the city as a process which is characterized by both change and stability in time. Now, this is especially interesting in talking about the city of Kiev, because of course the property is a set of is complex. It's not an urban center, but at the same time, the surrounding urban area is very much implicated in the way that this complex is understood and the value of it. Going further, the urban morphology of the city form and layering is very critical. So we shift, as I said, from monument to urban fabric as a whole, and recognize the local specificity of the urban fabric, and consider also the city as a process. There's change, but there's also stability over time, and this is important to identify. And identify also the changes across space and over time. These are two sort of axes that we could look at, diachronic and synchronic changes that are critical to note. And the history of the city in that sense is inscribed in its urban form. We also want to pay attention to the social dimension of the city, intangible layers, which are the intangible values as expressions of identity, memories, narratives, archives, written and iconographic documents, festivals, commemoration, rituals, traditional knowledge, planning and management structures as intangible values, traditional planning methods, and contemporary planning practice based on the analysis of land ownership and tenure, economic activities, infrastructure and services, and financial aspects. So we see that the intangible heritage values that we're talking to are associated with place and are managed through planning and urban development processes, urban management processes. I want to touch now upon the outcomes of an expert workshop that was organized in Fukuoka, in Japan, thanks to the government of Japan, in January of 2020. And we're very pleased to see here also that some of the experts who participated in this workshop are present with us. Present with us today. And one of the key outcomes was a methodology for the implementation of the whole recommendation, which is a kind of along 8 axes, 8 steps, which include the governance structure, which is looking at an intersectoral government structure that goes across different areas, a sustainable development status, identifying the sustainable development status, its needs and priorities, doing mapping and survey inventories that have to be very carefully made of both tangible, intangible resources, as well as the natural resources, assessing vulnerabilities, being able to see what threatens the OUV, integration and coherence, where the attributes of urban heritage identity that I mentioned and the OUV, or the outstanding universal value, and their vulnerabilities are mapped and identified, and there is a coherence across policies so that the protection can be ensured. The prioritization of actions and projects, identification of partnerships for local management, and capacity reinforcement. You can find these on our website, so I'm not going to go into detail on this. But what I wanted to point out going back is that, as you see here, the first step is the governance structure, And the second is the sustainable development status, being able to assess, to carry out a preliminary assessment of the sustainable development status of the property is very key to know what the needs are and what actions need to be prioritized. Reaching consensus with stakeholder consultations on the sustainable needs and priorities help integrate the heritage conservation with the sustainable needs and priorities. And in this regard, we also have developed at UNESCO the Culture 2030 indicators that I will speak about in a minute. So the thematic indicators for culture, the Culture 2030 indicators, were launched in November of 2019 during the forum of the Ministers of Culture at UNESCO, where there were more than 120 ministers of culture participating. You can find the links to the document here. It's also on our website as indicated, and you can find World Heritage Center website, you can find this. Now, the key point here, and the reason again to link it, is to see that one of the things we see when we look at the Culture 2030 indicator framework is that in the entire, out of the 17 goals and 169 target, there is only one target that is dedicated to culture, which is target 11.4, which really looks at the amount of expenditure that a country makes for the protection of its national, cultural, and natural heritage. Obviously, this does adequately represent the role and contribution of culture towards the 2030 agenda, or look at the sustainable development practices that could promote sustainable development through the integration of cultural heritage at World Heritage properties, for example, or any other heritage properties. So what we did was look at the 169 targets and identify about 25 of those that we saw as most pertinent and directly contribute to culture. And here we're looking at culture across all the 6 culture conventions of UNESCO and the 3 recommendations. So including, of course, the World Heritage Convention and the Historic Urban Landscape Recommendation. And we've regrouped them thematically. And this is also building off of the 5 Ps of the Sustainable Development Goal, as well as the 3 pillars of environment, social and economic pillars, and adding knowledge and skills. So the thematic areas we see are environment and resilience, prosperity and livelihoods, knowledge and skills, and inclusion and participation. So inclusion and participation is more along the social, knowledge and skills is to do with capacity building, and also with traditional knowledge, with diversity of cultural diversity, knowledge of cultural diversity. Prosperity and livelihoods is more around the economic pillar, and environment and resilience addresses sustainable. All of it addresses sustainable development, but that addresses the environment pillar. And you again find all the information on this on the website that's mentioned here.
Excuse me, dear Jody, can you be more brief, please, because we are out of time.
Okay, so I'm just wrapping up here. Just a few more slides, yeah. Sorry, I think I lost my screen. I need to go back. I'm no longer sharing my screen. Okay, all right. Now I want to just touch on the World Heritage Sustainable Development Policy that was adopted in 2015. And of course, I think all of you here are very familiar with this World Heritage Sustainable Development Policy, which has in it the policy on the integration of sustainable development perspective into the processes of the World Heritage Convention, that has the environmental sustainability as one of the pillars, and then inclusive social development, inclusive economic development, and the fostering of peace and security. And the idea of this policy was to look at the implementation of the 1972 convention, that the state parties consider these key dimensions which reflect the concern for planet, people, prosperity, and peace as important agendas of the 2030 agenda. All this was adopted just prior to the adoption of the 2030 agenda, which happened in December of 2015. Now, if I look at a tool, I want to give you a very quick overview, and this is the last thing I want to do, is to give you a quick overview of a tool that we've been developing, which is to look at the Sustainable Development Health Check. Now, the idea of this tool is to operationalize the World Heritage Sustainable Development Policy, and this is a tool that is under development and presently in a draft form. So this health check offers a preliminary sustainability profile regarding sustainable development and a design and strategy sustainability profile based on a self-assessment question. The preliminary sustainability profile allows respondents to assess the general health conditions for sustainable development in and around World Heritage sites. And so this tool is suitable for assessing the conditions for sustainable development and conservation at all stages of application, nomination, and heritage site conservation. And it is intended to be used by officials in national structures, organizations of interest to heritage conservation, non-governmental and civil society organization officers, World Heritage National Focal Points, and site managers. So the first thing that we did was, of course, to look at the synergies between the World Heritage Sustainable Development Policy and a number of other different international agreements, policies, and actions, and then develop a framework out of that. So the framework that we developed, the health check, basically looks at the sustainability profile overview across these dimensions of environmental sustainability, inclusive social development, inclusive economic development, fostering peace and security, governance, knowledge, and skills. Similarly, we also have a design and strategy sustainability overview, where each of these dimensions are also looked into. So each dimension, so it's a sort of questionnaire, which is a self-assessment questionnaire that is aligned to be able to give a response to develop a sustainability framework that gives an overall view of an overview of where the health condition of the status with regard to sustainability is of that either a project or design intervention or the general health check for the World Heritage property or at a national level. So this gives an alignment overall, and this gives you an idea of the type of issues that could be looked into, just as a glimpse. And with that, I just want to end by saying that this is a toolkit which is in process that will enable the implementation of sustainable development further at the World Heritage properties. And I also invite you to consult the website of the World Heritage Cities program, which is one of the 6 thematic programs formally approved and monitored by the World Heritage Committee, where I look specifically at reconciling conservation and development as part of it, and also at the Urban Future publication, where there was the first global report on urban heritage that looked at 8 different study areas and developed certain recommendations related to people, environment, and policies. I'm not going to go into each of them, as you can see them on the slides, and you can also see them in the publication. And with that is my last slide, and I want to thank you very much and leave you with these resources that I invite you to consult. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, dear Jody. Now I'm honored to present you the World Heritage Site Kiev St. Sofia Cathedral and related monastic buildings, Kiev Pечерская, on behalf of the National Historical and Cultural Reserve and National Conservation Area St. Sofia of Kiev, that are two institutions responsible for the management of this of its component.
Андрію, презентація, будь ласка, номер 2.
I will try to be brief because of the lack of time. I would like to introduce you to the main characteristic that form the outstanding universal value of the property, the principles on which the sustainability of its management is based, as well as the challenges and positive practices in its preservation and use. One moment, please.
Не працює.
It is important to note that we should not consider the components of the Kiev property, namely St. Sofia Cathedral and related monastic buildings and Kiev Pечерская with the Church of the Soviet Berestovo, separately from what the recommendation on historic urban landscape calls their broader context that was formed over the millennium. The historical development of the components of the property is conditioned primarily by the different setting of its location. On the other hand, these largest national shrines are united by the time of their foundation and their role in the spiritual and cultural life of the country. St. Sofia Cathedral was built in the 11th century as the main Christian church in the capital of Kievan Rus, becoming its spiritual, political, and cultural center. Following the urban development of the 18th century, an architectural ensemble was formed around St. Sofia Cathedral, which became an outstanding example of Baroque monastic construction, and today retains its historical role as the main focus of the upper town and its active compositional role in the Old Kiev area. Over the centuries, it preserves the unique harmony of architectural forms, expressive national color, and together with the other cultural heritage monuments, forms the traditional historical environment of our city. The first stone construction of the Kiev-Pечерsk monastery were built in the 11th century on the territory of the Kievan Prince's country residence of Berestovo. Today, it's a modern territory of the Church of the Soviet Berestovo, which is the oldest ground structure of this property's component. Gradually, the Kiev-Pечерская became the historical core around which the appropriate service infrastructure for pilgrims was developed. It turned into one of the largest sacred complexes in Ukraine. For the period of the late 17th, early 19th centuries, the ensemble of the Kiev-Pечерская entered in the line of the defensive structures of the city of Kiev, which have been partially preserved in its surroundings. Nowadays, the components of the property being part of the central historical area of Kiev city are organically connected with the urban environment in the immediate surrounding of St. Sofia of Kiev and the unique Dnieper River landscape in the immediate surrounding of the Kiev-Pечерская, that is landscape and historic monument of the historical landscape of the Kievan Hills and the Dnieper River Valley. The protection of the OUV is an important source of creating an inclusive, safe, resilient, and sustainable urban environment, a lever of influence on intensive and frequently uncontrolled urban development, and the possibility of preserving large green spaces of the Kiev, composing the visual integrity of the property. The OUV of the property inscribed in the World Heritage List under 4 criteria is expressed through the tangible and intangible attributes. They comprise its architectural value, including authentic building technologies and materials used in the construction and decoration of the architectural monuments of the property's components. Urban planning value formed by both the planning structure and the spatial organization of the property's components, including its compositional role in the urban and landscape environment. In addition, the OUV of the property is expressed through their intangible value as sacred cultural and educational centers, where along with the museum function, the traditions of religious practices and rituals are preserved until today. The management objective of the property are determined first of all by the need to preserve the OUV of the property under the pressure of natural and anthropogenic factors, and aimed as well at strengthening the role of the property as a source of spiritual well-being, peace and security of the population at both local and national levels, as a sustainable model of land use developed over centuries, as a constant process of the mutual adaptation of the monastic and church communities and the management bodies of the property in terms of compliance with the use regimes of World Heritage Site and its monuments and integration of the property into the environment. And as a source of stable jobs, particularly in the context of the economic collapse caused by the pandemic, for example, today both components of the property provide jobs for 570 people. Since the inscription of the property in the World Heritage List, the constant attention of the public authorities has been paid to the enhancing the preservation of the site in close cooperation with international heritage protection organizations such as World Heritage Center, ICOMOS and ICROM. An important step in this direction, which was preceded by the amendments to the law of Ukrainian cultural heritage protection, granting legal status to the basic concepts of the World Heritage, was a minor modification of the boundaries of the property's buffer zone by the extension and unification, as well as development and approval of the differentiated use and protection regimes. These regimes are based on the requirements of the for the preserving the OUV of the property, namely preservation of the role of its components as architectural dominance in the historical urban environment by creating optimal conditions for their observation, preservation of visual connections, valuable visual points and panoramas. Preservation of the green areas and panoramas along the Dnieper River as an integral part of the cultural value of the property, physical preservation of the monuments against negative man-caused and anthropogenic influences, and preservation of historic urban fabric, the property's components being its integral part. Another important task is the preservation of the OUV and its sustainable management is to approve as a matter of priority the management plan. Its draft have been developed in recent years by a working group of specialists involved in the management of the property in cooperation with national relevant institutions, authorities, and international e-commerce experts. Since the inscription in the World Heritage List, the property's monuments have undergone major restoration work based on the national restoration requirements as well as principles set out in the narrow document and Riga Charter. The sustainable use and management of numerous monuments of the property and its territory should base on the daily proper maintenance of heritage, which allows mitigating and in some cases minimizing the risks and negative factors affecting the property. Owing to the joint efforts of the central executive body, city administration, site managers, and involved NGOs, the processes of regulation of the urban development in Kyiv are at completion stage. This should enhance the sustainability of planning and reduce the risks of urban interventions within the historic areas, taking into account the use regimes of these areas during the development of urban planning documentation. We hope that in the near future, despite the complications and delays caused by the quarantine restrictions, the master plan of the city of Kyiv will be approved that will address the issues of the preservation of the property's OUV under the conditions of sustainable development of the city. Thank you very much. And I'm pleased to announce that we can move to the first session, which will be chaired by Professor Michael Turner, UNESCO Chair in Urban Design and Conservation Studies of Bezalel Academy of Arts and Design. And Michael, the floor is yours. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Daria. Could we just solve the problem of the echo you've got two microphones going, one of Marina's Lobina. So if that could be cancelled, because we can't hear what is being said. Thank you. Ah, much better. Good morning and good afternoon to everybody. It's great to be here to actually discuss then sustainable development in Kiev. This first session, we're going to look at two themes, that of the historic urban environment and prosperity and livelihoods. Each theme will be having an opening with a more general idea, and we'll have the opportunity of having 3 case studies, which are going to be really critical. And I think that the first one will just look very much at the approaches of what we're actually doing, taking on board some of the ideas which Jody has spoken about the historic urban environment. So, in fact, without further ado, I would like to introduce our first speaker, Professor Catherine Moore. She's a professor of landscape architecture in the University of Birmingham, and she has got great knowledge about the design, quality, theory, education, and practice, and has put out a book on the overlooking the visual, demystifying the art of design, providing the basis for critical artistic discourse. Without further ado, I'd like to introduce Catherine to give a presentation, please. Could you unmute?
You're still on mute, Catherine.
Okay, is that better?
Yes, thank you.
Okay, I will thank you very much, and thank you very much for inviting me today. It's a great pleasure to be here. I just want to share my screen. Does that share? Can you see this?
Yes, we can see it. Yes.
Okay, thank you.
Yes, it's okay.
Right. Thank you very much. Ah, that's a bit big. Okay. I will. I want to talk about landscape at a regional scale and the new idea of landscape and how we are using that to try and transform a region, really. And the first thing to say is that landscape shapes culture and identity. So if you think about where you grew up and how much that shapes who you are, your values, and if you talk to people about that, then it becomes evident how significant it is. It's a very powerful way to talk about landscape. So this new idea of landscape is that it's not just about nature conservation and ecology, and it's not just about the physical context or the national parks or the constructed realm, public realm, or the gardens and allotments and the places that we sit in to watch the world go by. The landscape also reflects our memories and our values. The landscape is that sense of pride that we have, that we share in the places where we work and we live, the experiences that we have of place. So the landscape is about ideas, and it's the expression of those ideas that shape our experience. Now, currently, we make all these distinctions between objective and subjective, fact and value, science and art, nature and culture. And my work is based on the idea that this is actually is a very damaging thing. And it leads to a silo-driven approach where we have a silo-driven approach to development and to transformation, institutionally, professionally, and spatially. It also leads to us having very simplistic and outmoded financial models and growth targets and evaluations. Organisations are fragmented into departments with different budget lines, line managers and systems, which leads to a lack of integrated thinking, a sectoral approach, and greater expense, and actually impoverished environments for and poor quality of life for many communities. The West Midlands, I'm talking about the West Midlands because that's where I live and that's where I've been working for the last 10 years. It's the crucible of the Industrial Revolution. I live in Birmingham, which was once the city of 1,000 trades. The landscape is therefore, as you can see on the picture below, is very, for 200 years, it's been dug up and exploited, it's ravaged. The way we see the city now is to see it in its terms of its buildings and its roads. You don't see any contours, you don't see any rivers, or only if you look very quickly, or very carefully rather. And so that idea of landscape as being identity and culture has been lost in the development process. And actually the consequences of that is to have, even though we've put so much money into trying to improve people's lives, it hasn't really done much at all. So we've come up with this idea that the whole region should become a national park. And this is an economic proposition that brings together the environment, citizens, businesses, NGOs, and the public sector around an idea that overarches all the different sectors: economic, brownfield redevelopment, transport, social, cultural, health and well-being, all of those. And it's being seen as important regionally because it will help to change attitudes and identities and levels of confidence within the region by creating thriving, healthy communities, with an aspiration to transform the West Midlands into the healthiest region in the UK, and actually to put quality of life and environment at the top of the agenda. So these guys, it was their imagination that led to the wealth of the region, to the region becoming this centre that really transformed the world through industry. But now we're looking at a different kind of vision. It is not a new kind, it's not a traditional national park. If you ever come here, it doesn't look anything like a traditional national park. It's a new kind of urban national park, which brings the values of a national park to urban populations rather than expecting them to travel out to the countryside. It involves working with businesses as much as schools and local communities. And the idea is that we bring together a host of different things together to create something that is more than just the sum of the parts. Of course, it's been influenced by COVID, and we're trying to achieve a levelling up. You may have heard of that expression across the region because COVID has exposed the impoverished nature of many communities. But one of the key problems is that over the last 70 years, it's been acceptable to think that most of the achievable and desirable outcomes, the desire to address the quality of life issues, comes after all the big decisions have been made. But what we've realised is that that is the wrong way round. This has not improved air quality, it's not created thriving communities, and it's not made us resilient, and it's not even created a sense of place. So to try and change this agenda, we are working across the boundaries, across professional, disciplinary and spatial boundaries, working without making distinctions between facts and values, tangible and intangible heritage, words and images, working with maps of the region to transform perceptions, to give a completely different view of the region that makes people think, God, is that where I live? To work with ideas to inspire and encourage different behaviours and attitudes rather than resolving, but always going straight to techniques and technologies, and working, as I said, to put quality of life at the top of the agenda. This has hit a nerve because increasingly regional and national government are looking for inspiration and fresh ideas. So this is the region. So it's very different from the beautiful places that you're describing. It's the whole region across with a number of cities and about 2 million people. And we've been achieving this by having exhibitions and conferences, partnerships across the region. We've been working with partners in Sweden and in Italy through the Saturn project. We've been looking at how we can engage with these key events that are happening, the Black Country Geopark, which is fantastic that it's happened, Coventry City of Culture, Birmingham 2022 for the Commonwealth Games, and the arrival of this HS2. All the time we're referring to the UN SDGs because landscape is actually vital to achieving nearly all of them. It has implication for nearly all of them. Water, we get all of our water from Wales. How do we deal with drought? How do we deal with flooding, urbanisation, and the depletion of natural resources? And the key is to tell people here that it's not just out there somewhere where this happens, but it's actually here as well. We might only have 50 harvests left of the soil if we carry on messing it up so much. Where are we going to get our food from, especially in the context of Brexit, and particularly in Birmingham? How do we deal with air pollution, which is really a dreadful problem here? So it's all about seeing the bigger picture. We've got a pilot that's been running since 2003 in the Black Country, where they have resolved to see the whole of the Black Country as urban park, not just joining at the green spaces. We've been looking at national, international examples, for example, in the Ruhr, where 17 cities came together to achieve a radical transformation of a post-industrial landscape, which is what we have here. And so this has now become one of the major tourist attractions in the region. So all of these things give people here the confidence that we could achieve something that's different. It's good for the region, it's counterintuitive. People can't quite believe that we're talking about a West Midlands National Park. The value of it is that it's a vision, it's a spatial vision, not a list of objectives, which we've seen so many lists. It's beginning to attract investment and funding into the region, and it's meeting this demand to do things differently. And it's giving us the opportunity to look at different models of investment and governance, and to pull together various strategies from across these different sectors. We've got a number of different projects, project proposals, so people can understand what we're talking about. For example, with the geopark, where are all the sites? Where are the trails? Where are the places that can be developed so people can come and see this? We're looking at the ring parks. So these are some of the maps that we've been looking at to try, and this is a map that not as you see it now, but where the rivers and the canals have been emphasised rather than the roads, to actually realise that there's a whole system of Edwardian fringe parks, and that actually the pink lines are the canals, the blue lines are the rivers. And if you begin to think about how those could be joined together as the attractors for, or the points for development rather than the road system, which is what we currently do, that we could really begin to have a different region. And then how we can spread that across the region so that we think about having city centre parks in each of the cities, and then these can be connected to long distance footpaths through the remnants of these Edwardian fringe belts and the existing green open spaces. This all requires working across boundaries, the political boundaries. It means setting up a different set of criteria to do with health and mobility, that actually setting up partnerships so that we can achieve some of these objectives, become a region of 1,000 parks and squares, celebrate the industrial heritage, become a region of invisible rivers, these are the awful rivers that we have, to becoming a region of 1,000 lakes and streams and water purification. So that we can actually really we can't achieve this individually. It makes people work in a cross-disciplinary way. And we're working currently on setting up the business case, looking at these different economic models, and setting up different kinds of governance, which means that we actually don't just muscle each other out of the way, but really share the aspirations, the costs and the rewards. And that's in brief, is it? Thank you very much.
Well,
sorry, a little bit over.
Yeah, thank you very much, Catherine. I think that you opened up then the importance for the idea of an integrative approach, and what Jody has spoken about, the historic urban landscape, a holistic idea. It is beyond the historic ensemble and breaking down boundaries. Absolutely. And I think that here we will actually be able to consider that in Kiev, instead of just looking at the center and the compound, but it really is how the whole city and its and the river and the area can benefit from the inscription and the heritage values. Which brings me on to the first example, and that is that of Florence. And I'd like to introduce Carlo Francini. He is a good friend and colleague of many years, and he will speak about the monitoring and the updating of the management plan of the Historic Center of Florence. And we always tend to speak about the goal 11. And here I think that we've been challenged about goal 17.
Thank you, thank you, Mike. Thank you, Mike. Okay, I'm ready for presentation here. Okay. Okay. Good morning, everyone. Thank you for inviting me in this online meeting to present my city, Florence. The Historic Center of Florence has been inscribed on the World Heritage List in 1982 under the criteria 1, 2, 3, 4, and 6. The blue line shows the boundaries of the site, which follow the old city walls built at the beginning of the 14th century and almost entirely demolished in the middle of the 19th century. Here you can also see the boundaries of the buffer zone, which includes the hills around the city. The buffer zone was approved by the World Heritage Committee in 2014 and definitively adopted in May 2020 by the current urban planning tools. A management plan has been placed since 2006, and it was monitored over the years and updated in 2016. We are currently working on the updating of the management plan expected for 2021. All the documents concerning the management of the site are available both in Italian and English in our website. An important activity for our office was 2018 monitoring, through which we measure the progress and the results of the 2000 management plan. 33 projects were monitored, involving more than 30 public and private stakeholders. The projects are relevant to the following macro areas: management of the tourism system, conservation knowledge of the monumental heritage, transport system, the river Arno and the climate change, livability, commerce, and residence in the historic center. The 33 projects seek to mitigate the criticality of the World Heritage Site, such as mass tourism, conservation, flood, mobility issue, and reduction of residents. To achieve the 17 Sustainable Development Goals of the 2030 Agenda, in particular the goal number 11, make cities and human settlements inclusive, safe, resilient, and sustainable, as well as the World Heritage Strategic Objectives, the 5 C's: conservation, credibility, community, communication, and capacity building. Every project was monitored using the Sustainable Development Goals of the 2030 Agenda as targets. The innovative aspect of the monitoring is precisely the consistency of each project with at last one of the 17 Sustainable Development Goals and related 169 targets, which are now the basis of every initiative and project. The analysis of the trend of project over time aims to highlight progress towards the Sustainable Development Goals. In this slide, you can see a project sheet illustrating the structure of the document and the Sustainable Development Goals on 2030 Agenda used as targets. The monitoring was positively evaluated by ICOMOS International, which underlined as follows, quote, "The comprehensive monitoring approach set out in the document, including efficacy indicators, is commendable. Progress is being made in implementing public transport improvements, tramlines, electric taxis, bike sharing, and the recommendation of the 2017 Joint World Heritage Center ICOMOS Advisory Mission are being implemented. This year, we have started working at the next management plan. During the update, the COVID-19 pandemic raised in Italy from March to May all activities and services related to culture, social life, and tourism were closed. And also our work for developing a new management plan slowed down. In November, we face a further lockdown, and as you can imagine, we are facing new dynamics. New problems have been raised, very different ones from the typical challenges that our World Heritage Site was trying to counteract before COVID-19. Let us just think about the long-term impact of tourism in Florence, which has, until March 2020, one of the major threats of the historic center of Florence, and now the situation has completely changed. Obviously, our main challenge at the moment is the health of the citizen and the city user, safeguarding the social and economic activities of the city, compensating for the lack of funds in the tourist sector, planning a safe and sustainable recovery of the urban lifestyle and dynamics. As I mentioned earlier, currently we are updating the new management plan, which will be issued in 2021. As in the previous document, the future management plan will be based on the 2030 agenda. In particular, it will take into account the ISTAT indicators related to SDGs to measure the impact that each city project has on the 2030 agenda. ISTAT indeed has been called by the United Nations Statistical Commission to play the role of Italian national coordinator in the production of indicators for measuring sustainable development and monitoring its objectives. Therefore, this innovative methodology will allow us to be more coherent with the national and international tools used to measure the impact of 2030 agenda. This will help us to follow the implementation of our action plan and its contribution at the Sustainable Development Goals and UOV maintenance and enhancement over time. In the current slide, you can see an example of a strategic project included within our management plan, the Greenway. This project tried to contribute to the following Sustainable Development Goals, number 8, 11, 12, and 17. The Greenway project tried to unify 3 separate green itineraries passing through gardens inside the World Heritage Site, which connects gardens and monuments of great cultural significance. This project wants to raise awareness about this unique itinerary, which enhances the landscape and hillside of Oltrarno district, the southern area of the World Heritage Site. As you can see from the slide, the project is consistent with the goal 11, targets 11.4 and 11.7, and with the ISTAT indicator, incidence of urban green areas on urbanized area of the cities. For every strategic project of the 2021 management plan, we will select and apply one of the indicators identified by ISTAT for the Sustainable Development Goals. Thus, our action plan intends to conserve and enhance the outstanding universal value which brought Florence to be inscribed on the World Heritage List, while fostering projects which contribute to the Sustainable Development Goals. All the documents concerning the management of the site are available both in Italian and English at the following website, www.firenzepatrimoniomondiale.it. Thank you very much for your attention and many greetings from Florence. I remember that Florence and Kiev as a twin cities. It's very important for us is together for the celebration of this very special occasion. Thank you very much. Thank you, Mike.
Thank you, Carlo. I think that Florence has given us also an exemplary idea about management, not just simply to tick the box, but to understand that it is something which is dynamic, it needs to be updated, and it needs to manage then the values and confront the issues which the city is then actually meeting, especially with the COVID-19. But more especially, it has taken on board the historic urban landscape approach and brought it into completely new fields. And I would really then suggest that people should be able to look at it. I think it is available online, and it is something which is an important example. So we're moving on to theme 2, which is prosperity and livelihoods. And this is really essential because, in fact, it's not just simply the fact of listing monuments and sites, but also Article 5 of the Convention, putting heritage in the life of the community. And it does link on to the first 2 lectures that we actually extend it beyond the site itself. We heard all about the number of people employed in Kiev, which relate then to the historic, to the inscribed site, but it must extend even beyond this. This is where the opportunity actually comes. So with this, we will also have an opening presentation. We have got 2 examples, one of Bordeaux and one of the Historic Center of Naples. But we will then open up with a presentation by Jonas Riegler. He is currently the Stakeholder Involvement Officer of JPI of Urban Europe, which is an important research and generator of activities for heritage. He'll be speaking about urban transitions towards green and circular economies, the role of research and innovation. Over to you, Jonas.
Thank you so much, Michael. I hope I can share my screen. 1 second. You should be able to see my presentation. Can you give me a sign, please?
That's okay.
That's okay. Great.
It's okay.
Great. Yeah, thank you so much for the introduction and the opportunity to speak here today. It's a pity that we cannot meet in Kiev, really, because yeah, I really like Kiev. I spent some very nice days over Orthodox Christmas there a couple of years ago, and it's a bummer that we cannot be there. So today we already heard about the role of culture for sustainability and vice versa, the potential of cultural heritage for sustainable urban development and achieving the SDGs and the UN Habitat New Urban Agenda. There were also so many keywords which resonate very well with my input here, and I just would like to mention a couple, which is governance structure, the big picture, capacity building. It very well links to what Catherine presented about post-industrial heritage, and really about how culture and heritage contributes or can be contribute to urban transition towards sustainable development. As Michael already said, I'm Johannes Riegler. I am based in Vienna, Austria, and I represent the Joint Programming Initiative Urban Europe. And before I will just give you a brief introduction to JPI Urban Europe, what this program actually is. So JPI Urban Europe is the knowledge hub, if you will, for research and innovation, which brings together 20 European countries, and it's based on national commitments. The strategic backbone of it, so where we started developing our strategies, the Agenda 2030 with its SDGs and new UN Habitats, New Urban Agenda. So over the last about 10 years, we have funded 84 projects which bring together city administration, businesses, NGOs, and the research and innovation community to come together and put together projects and co-develop and co-design capacities and new knowledge for urban transitions. Yeah, so although the funding of the project is at the core of what we're doing, we also maintain, we do more than that. We also have a stakeholder involvement platform called the Agora, which brings together basically, urban actors and stakeholders from across Europe and beyond, actually. We have, just to mention that, we have another 15 projects in the pipeline, which we are going to grant very soon. And yeah. And we are at the very, JPR Europe is at the interesting point of time, because we are at the moment designing a new program called Driving Urban Transitions. So this will be a 7-year partnership with the European Commission. The efforts will be significantly larger than those which we had in the past 10 years. So hence this partnership aims at mobilizing a critical mass to step up the game about tackling urban challenges. And again, it's very much at the center to bring together local authorities, municipalities, businesses, citizens, to translate those global strategies of the SDGs, the Urban Agenda for the EU, UN Habitat Urban Agenda, the European Green Deal, and others into the local context. Just to give you a brief idea before I go pick out one and go into more depth, the focus areas of these, so these are the 3 pillars for this partnership, for this Driving Urban Transition partnership with the European Commission. That is the positive energy districts and neighborhoods. So how can we transform the urban energy system and have neighborhoods which generate more energy than they use. Green urban economies, I will focus on that in a minute. So how can we link nature-based solutions, circular economies, and so on for transition towards green urban futures or green urban economies. And the 50-minute city, that it very much links to how can we rethink the urban mobility system and urban space, so that we need probably less mobility and have other uses for public spaces, for example. So as I said, we are currently in the process of developing this this program. So we had a couple of public consultations open. We worked with a number of municipalities and local governments to really distill the issues of which are the most pressing. If you feel like there's more to that, please get back to me. We are always happy to have more input. So this is just to give you a little bit of context what topics we are talking about, and they are not holistic. So this is just a selection. For example, on the green urban economies, it links very much to building materials and technologies, robust circular economies which build up on the local context and the cultures. And in the next minutes, I'm gonna focus very much on this one. Mitigate negative externalities like air pollution and waste generation, and urban agriculture and local food production, nature-based solutions and urban greening. But also we would like to, or we see the need, or what the stakeholders and local municipalities told us where they see the need for research and innovation is also to go to find new indicators to go beyond the GDPs, to have a more holistic perspective on that. With that, I would like to very briefly pick out one of the projects which we funded out of this 85. That is the Cities of Making project, because I think it very well links to the issue of, I hope this video starts now. It links very well to culture, to post-industrial cultures, to what does it actually mean to have production or to produce something in a city within an urban area. And this project looked at what does it mean? How can we build up on these productive or industrial traditions and translate that into a new chapter to help cities to be more innovative, circular, inclusive, and resilient. So you see in this video, this video was was one of the outcomes of this project. you can look it up on the, it's a very nice documentary which they did over an hour. It explains what it actually means to produce in a city and how can we facilitate this, get the transition going with this approach. This project also developed a book and a serious game, or patterns as they call it, that's called Foundries of the Future. And this book very much underlines that urban manufacturing and small-scale industrial activity, which builds up on these local cultures and identities, can open a new chapter in the transition of cities towards a more innovative, circular, and inclusive, robust future. So in the second part of the book, it's intended as a handbook, which synthesizes the research and the fieldwork of this project, which was conducted in a number of cities. It was Paris, Brussels, and London, which have many similarities in terms of problems and challenges on this, but also a number of solutions or approaches to overcome these challenges were identified. And these patterns, this is basically, you see them on, these are these cards, they should help, they developed these 50 patterns which should help local administration, municipalities, and any other stakeholders to actually identify what does it mean to produce in the city and how can this help to be more sustainable and livable. So the conclusions from my presentation really are that research and innovation projects can be a vehicle to facilitate co-creation, capacity building among actors to drive urban transitions. The local context and thus also cultural heritage has an important role to play in developing these urban transition pathways. So the context is very, very essential here. And urban transitions requires the opening of a new chapter regarding urban manufacturing and small-scale industrial activities in central areas. With that, I just would like to, again, thank the organizers for the invitation. We are cooperating with the Ministry of Education and Science in the Ukraine, and we hope that we can deepen this collaboration in the years and in the future, in the years to come and in the future. But JPI Urban Europe is basically open to anybody who wants to contribute and exchange, and it really builds a knowledge hub. So if you're representing international organization, please get in touch if you're interested, or a country which you think that this is interesting, let's explore what we can do together. Just drop me an email, please. We also have a stakeholder community, the Agora, which is open to anyone who's interested in the matter. We also have a joint call coming up in January 2021, which is called Urban Transformation Capacities, which is open to many countries, not all countries. If you have need more information, also send me an email and I can link you up, or subscribe to our newsletters. Thank you so much for the opportunity to speak here. It was very interesting. I hope I could point out some bigger picture of what we are doing on the European scale, and I think it links. There are several links to the topic of today. Thank you so much.
You've actually thrown down the gauntlet, and we hope that there'll be a lot of people who will then now apply. But you're the stakeholder involvement officer. So it's beyond the stakeholders, it's identifying a whole new group of stakeholders like universities, research people, to become involved within heritage. And I think that's what we're actually saying. It is culture for sustainable development. Again, the anti-silo approach. It's not them and us, but in fact how them and us become them one, and actually merging for sustainable development. And I think the most important thing that you've spoken about here is therefore of circular economies. And I'm a big fan of circular knowledge. And I think that this is something which you're doing. But now we've just got the understanding of how livelihood and how this merges into our theme. And now we have two examples. The first case study will be of Bordeaux, and that is the Port of the Moon. It is probably the largest urban heritage on the World Heritage List. So it is really probably a prime example where we can actually understand a more comprehensive approach to protecting urban heritage. So I'd like to introduce Anne-Laure Monia. She is the head of the World Heritage mission of the Bordeaux Metropolis, which is responsible for the managing of the World Heritage property. And it is also the heritage as a capital, and also Bordeaux as a capital within itself. S'il vous plaît.
Bonjour, est-ce que vous voyez mon écran?
Oui.
Oui, ça va.
D'accord. Voilà, ça va mieux comme ça. Bonjour à tous. Merci de m'avoir invité à cet anniversaire de la ville de Kiev. Je suis Anne-Laure Monia, je suis responsable de la mission du patrimoine mondial Bordeaux-Port de la Lune au sein de la direction de l'urbanisme de Bordeaux Métropole. Je vais vous parler plus particulièrement d'une démarche mise en place pour accompagner les projets de transformation et d'évolution du site inscrit sur la liste du patrimoine mondial. Une démarche qui considère le patrimoine à plusieurs échelles comme un capital pour le développement, un capital à faire fructifier. Avant cela, quelques éléments de contexte que certains connaissent déjà, mais c'est nécessaire de rappeler que Bordeaux est une ville européenne dynamique sur la façade atlantique qui accueille 240 000 habitants, elle, au sein d'une agglomération qui compte 750 000 habitants. Donc, c'est une petite métropole. Le site inscrit s'appelle Bordeaux-Port de la Lune. Il est inscrit sur la liste du patrimoine mondial en 2007 en tant qu'ensemble urbain vivant. Ce site doit sa prospérité au fleuve Garonne, qui permet un port, qui permet des échanges avec le monde, qui apporte une prospérité qui est économique et aussi intellectuelle. Donc, je suis heureuse de célébrer avec Kiev finalement la partie immatérielle de cette inscription sur la liste du patrimoine mondial. Vous voyez sur l'image le premier pont qui a permis de relier la rive droite et la rive gauche et qui a définitivement changé la topographie historique du lieu. Le port de Bordeaux, je le disais, était très important pour la prospérité économique au XVIIIe siècle, c'est le plus grand port d'Europe. Et à la fin du XXe siècle, il devient trop petit pour accueillir les grands paquebots et bateaux de transport maritime. Et son déclin se lie dans le paysage urbain totalement déserté au profit d'autres espaces. On voit un centre historique noir envahi par la voiture. Et il faut un grand projet urbain au centre duquel se trouve le patrimoine et le fleuve pour arriver à réhabiliter ce centre historique qui redevient un centre habité, prospère, avec un patrimoine accessible, gratuit et préservé de l'encombrement touristique grâce à ce vaste espace des quais. voilà la même place que celle que je vous ai montrée tout à l'heure, qui a retrouvé son dynamisme et sa prospérité. Alors ce changement a été rendu possible par la mise en place d'un grand projet coordonné qui s'est appuyé sur la mobilité et la reconquête des bords de Garonne par le réaménagement de Michel Courajou, mais aussi par tout un panel d'actions tous azimuts sur tout le patrimoine monumental, bien sûr, mais aussi sportif, scolaire, les espaces verts. Et je vais plus particulièrement vous parler aujourd'hui de la démarche d'accompagnement des transformations des quartiers de maisons individuelles qui font l'essentiel de ce site inscrit sur la liste du patrimoine mondial. Ici, une image de la cartographie du site qui prend 1800 hectares sur la rive gauche le long de la Garonne, évidemment la Garonne et ses berges, avec le quartier de l'extension du port au 19e et tous ces quartiers qui sont essentiellement des quartiers des shops et de maisons de ville, de petites unités d'habitation individuelles pour lesquelles un recensement exhaustif a été lancé de manière à pouvoir déterminer une réglementation adaptée à leur évolution. Donc, immeuble par immeuble, des fiches ont été réalisées dans la perspective de dessiner un plan d'urbanisme adapté à la morphologie des ensembles bâtis et des îlots. On voit ici une photo aérienne qui montre un cœur d'îlot qui comporte des îlots de fraîcheur urbain très verdoyants, mais aussi des anciens hangars. Le plan permet de redonner de la constructibilité à cet espace-là, alors qu'un plan local d'urbanisme traditionnel donne une règle unique en modèle 42 ou M pour tout le monde. Ce plan-là est vraiment sur mesure. On voit ici le projet qui a pu être réalisé sur cette base et je vais montrer des images de ce que ça donne depuis la rue. Donc l'inventaire est fait immeuble par immeuble. Il est déterminé ici que les constructions existantes ne sont pas à préserver et qu'elles peuvent être remplacées par des constructions nouvelles et le cœur d'îlot réaménagé. On a mis en place ce travail en faisant appel à la réflexion des architectes et des étudiants en architecture par la mise en place d'un appel à idées dès 2006 qui montre comment immeuble par immeuble, les transformations pour poursuivre la vie de ces bâtiments hérités sont possibles, mais pas n'importe comment, et élaborer un règlement adapté à cette évolution. Alors, un exemple d'architecture en imitation, on peut surélever des maisons en rez-de-chaussée, il y en a plus de 10 000 à Bordeaux, en ajoutant un étage complet en pierre, mais ce n'est pas seulement la pierre qui fait l'unité, c'est aussi l'ordonnancement et la qualité du dessin. Mais on peut également imaginer des surélévations par contraste parce que, évidemment, la créativité actuelle ne doit pas être écartée au moment de poursuivre l'évolution de ces habitations pour conserver leur valeur d'usage et encore l'augmenter. Alors, il faut pouvoir regarder ça, évidemment, à échelle urbaine et on a des exemples dans le passé. Vous avez sur cette image, la façade des quais du 18e qui vient à l'avant d'une ancienne porte médiévale des murailles de Bordeaux. On a aussi ici un immeuble beaucoup plus récent dont on voit que les pliures viennent se raccorder aux immeubles existants, et c'est ce que le règlement a voulu reprendre en donnant comme hauteur constructible, îlot par îlot, rue par rue, la hauteur des constructions protégées. On voit que le dialogue peut être engagé avec l'architecture ancienne. Voilà, c'est ce que je voulais vous partager de cette expérience de Bordeaux sur la question de comment le patrimoine peut être un capital pour le développement, et dans le cas précis de Bordeaux, montrer la partie à l'échelle urbaine, mais aussi cette partie peut-être un peu moins connue d'un travail très fin mené à la parcelle sur ces 40 000 parcelles, avec un règlement d'urbanisme qui est désormais dessiné îlot par îlot. Voilà, je vous remercie de votre attention.
Thank you.
Et bon anniversaire à Kiev.
Right. Thank you very much. That was really something quite important, that we're all facing similar problems in different scales, especially the problems of changing societies, changing demands on our heritage. But what you've actually highlighted is the importance, the added value for people. In other words, the smaller projects which make for livable spaces. And it links together a lot of these ideas, which has come along on Ville 4 heures, the 15-minute city, which is also part and parcel of what we're actually trying to do. So I think that this brings us on to the second example, that of Naples. And I would like to introduce now Mr. Giancarlo Furolano. He is the architect, again, responsible for the UNESCO World Heritage Site in Naples, and he will be speaking about changing approaches to the conservation of historic cities in the face of the pandemic, something which we're all facing. So over to you, Giancarlo.
Thank you. Good morning, everyone. I have to...
Have you chosen the channel?
It's good now.
Mr. Furolano, you have to choose the channel, English channel. Do you hear me, Mr. Furolano? You have... So?
Yes, are you ready?
It's okay, yes.
It's okay.
Hear it, no?
Yeah, off you go.
Michael, it's you. Mr. Furolano, can you
Yes.
choose the channel, please, in the bottom of the screen? You have... You have languages channels, so you have to choose English. To the right of the bottom to share screen, to the right you have languages. Mr. Furolano, are you here with us? Mr. Furolano, you have to switch on the sound and to choose a language channel.
Yes, language channel. I don't find
because
it.
we didn't hear you.
Okay.
Please choose English channel.
Yes, I don't know. No.
Where?
Where is it? No, ma lei non mi sente.
Aspetta. C'è scritto interprete. No, sto scrivendo.
Signora Giancarlo,
Sì, no.
devo scegliere inglese,
No,
lingua inglese.
yes, I understand you, but I
Perché
don't.
non la sentiamo?
I don't find the channel.
I think we are hearing him in English, isn't it, Darina?
Sorry?
Aren't we hearing him in English?
Yes, it's very clear. So Giancarlo.
So there's no problem, I think.
No problem.
Do you hear Giancarlo?
Yes, really.
We hear
really.
him clearly.
Darina,
So
clearly,
maybe he
sure.
proceed?
So that's we are perhaps have some problems because we don't hear and we don't see him. Okay.
The interpreters don't hear him. Is that the problem? Maybe it's just the interpreter because we can hear him.
Okay. So let's proceed and we will systemize from our end. Sorry, excuse me. Let's proceed.
Okay, thank you.
Giancarlo, off you go.
Vai Giancarlo, ti ascoltiamo. We'll listen you. Come on.
Adesso mi ascoltate?
Ascoltiamo Giancarlo, vai in English,
Vado.
please.
Okay.
In English, please.
In English, yes.
Vai, continua.
Allora, for the 30th anniversary of the inscription of Key Santa Sofia Cathedral, and on this occasion expresses its appreciation and wishes for success to the work done for the protection and promotion of the site and historical heritage of the whole city. To these formal thanks, I add my own satisfaction for your invitation, accompanied by the regret for not being able to remedy to my lack of direct knowledge of your city, which I hope will be possible to visit at the next meeting in 2021. This is a very difficult moment for all peoples and all national communities in every aspect, from the more simple one, such as organizing participation in an interesting initiatives, as the present one, having to confront the formal dimension of our daily work and adopting innovative but little experimented communication system, at least for me, I mean, to the much more dramatic ones, such as facing the current living condition of large section of the population, overwhelmed by the economic crisis induced by the pandemic. In the present phase, due to continuation of this upheaval, it is in fact very difficult to believe that we will be able to continue to operate according to the logic and the procedures so far adopted in each sector and in particular in the specific one we are dealing with. These perplexities are obviously much more serious and critical as regards the management of city sites, in consideration of the crisis of the environmental system as a whole, for the conservation of the environmental sites so dependent on the diseased global system. And I want to thank Prof. Catherine Moore for her interesting contribution. But it should be emphasized that the strong changes in people's mobility and usability of public spaces are a cause for concern for the management of specific unique sites such as monuments, museums, and architectural or archaeological complexes. Many countries are responsible for large historical centers on UNESCO's World Heritage List. They constitute conspicuous parts of wide and complex cities. Italy is particularly involved, being rich in city size, such as Naples, Rome, Venice, Florence. For these cities, the interaction between the metropolitan dimension and the specific dynamics of the historical part plays a relevant role, especially on the economic level. Conservation problems have generally been linked to the role played by the tourism. In Italy, it was necessary to face the criticality of extreme cases due to excess demand, such as Venice or Florence, or to control the gradual increase in flows, such as Naples, or to ignite international interest as for Matera. Now, these themes takes on a completely different connotation, as if the cry, "the king is naked," suddenly resonated by magic. Tourism, hitherto exalted as an inexhaustible and beneficial source of economic growth and cultural exchange and diffusion of knowledge, appears now as a curse, a monster that has emptied the hard cities of population and urban quality, and clearly reveals the hitherto masked dark face of that monothematic income. This evaluation forces us to review the vocation entrusted to different places and the sense of the political direction so far given to development of communities settled in urban heritage areas that history and past civilization have handed down to us with difficulty but magical continuity. It is therefore necessary in this new contingency to reread with urgency the new maturity, the general frameworks that had been built for the conservation and development of these centers, and most of all of these communities. With regards to the experience of Naples, all documentation can be easily consulted on the website of the municipality of Naples, but it still seems relevant to briefly describe what has been planned and implemented up to now. By adopting an innovative management plan on 2014, to give a proactive and articulated turn to the approach to historic center. This plan was considered essential given the high degree of criticality in which the site was at the time of its registration in 1995. First of all, it used the indication of urban planning 2004 and sector plans already prepared for the municipality of Naples, directing them towards operational investment choice that would integrate and strengthen all national and European funding instruments. Naples is a case study that I would like to define as particularly interesting due to the complexity of the issues of addressed and proposal advanced, restoration of the public and the private architectural heritage, but also of the ordinary building fabric at the ancient system of the road network, all supported by a shrewd financial coordination policy of the various investment strands, education, welfare, culture, support to production, and so on. This careful planning was successful due to the occurrence of a strategic institutional convergence of all public administration and stakeholders involved and direct contribution of UNESCO experts. These are positive aspects to imitate in this case study, which were followed by the critical issues due to the loss of the collaborative spirit and the prevalence of political interests of opposing parties, circumstances that have strongly and unjustifiably slowed down the virtuous process. But being confident about the possibility to learn from one's mistake, the analysis of this phenomenon could be an equally important element to reflection. The experience makes it clear that to cope with the needs of urban recovery and even more with emergencies, the only way is unity of purpose of all the forces involved. For a country that has a strong tradition, cultural conservation and restoration, such as Italy, it now becomes a priority being able to read, change, and formulate political proposals, identifying strategies and general objectives. This is the challenge that politics in the current crisis must face in order to regenerate the values of the cultural works, of historical urban landscape and environment, aiming at a more equitable and qualified distribution of the employment offer, and for the enhancement of the commitment to useful public activities, and for the protection of historical and environmental heritage as a common, non-private asset. Division of public affairs would lead to intervention that could promote coexistence, inclusion of all religious and ethnic cultural components of societies that tend to be seen as impediment to living together and not as an opportunity, and in times of crisis become reason for conflict because feared as interference and threats to unspecified ethnics, economics, and territorial integrity. I thank you for your attention, and I wish us all good work and good luck. Thank you.
Giancarlo, that was really something quite special. And I'm glad that we ended with Naples. It's a place which is already trying to manage disasters from the eruption of Vesuvius and just the issues of pandemic. But in fact, that I would like to also to relate to the fact that it was always a tourist place. Goethe, in his travels, the Italian journey, actually arrived in Naples and actually said that one may write or paint as much as one likes, but this place, the shore, the Gulf, Vesuvius, the citadels, the villas, everything defies description. And I think that this is exactly what we need to do, to actually challenge the description of the heritage and the values which we have, whether in fact we can then bring back the tourists of the Italian journey, but this is something, the challenge which we have for COVID-19. Anyway, I would like to thank all our 5 participants for these first 2 themes of the first session. And for the time, we will then move the discussion all together at the end of the session. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, our excellent chair and all the speakers. And I would like to give the floor to the next chair of the session 2, Professor Elizabeth Wines, ICOMOS focal point and Deakin University and Hong Kong University. Miss Elizabeth, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much, and good evening. Oh, actually, good afternoon for you. Of course, it's evening from me. I'm on the other side of the world and delighted to be joining you on this interesting theme about sustainable development practices. And I'd like, as an architect, to emphasize the word practices, because I think the next section that we're going to concentrate on, in fact, the next 2 sections, is what are we practically doing in this challenge for sustainable development for our urban heritage. And I think we must bring to this management approach knowledge and practical skills, follow a logical process in determining our approaches to conservation of our urban heritage. And particularly, I loved, Catherine, thank you, for your emphasis on the importance of vision, your idea of a region of 1,000 parks, and then there have also been some interesting examples of developments and interventions. We saw in Bordeaux a little bit of a reference to new development and how that might fit in. Now, in theme 3, we have two speakers. And I think in theme 3, we will be
looking at knowledge and skills. And the introduction by Jody talked about the Hull approach and either the 6 or the newly expanded to 8 steps. It was expanded after the Japan meeting earlier this year. And we have been hearing examples from all of these steps, which I think has been just wonderful. And so I just would like to make a reminder to the speakers, 10 minutes only, please, is your time slot. We have 5 of you and a lot of interesting information to hear. Now, our first speaker is Dr. Carola Hein. She's Chair of History of Architecture and Urban Planning at Delft University of Technology. And her theme, Historical Geospatial Mapping as Foundation for Sustainable Development of Urban Heritage Sites, of course, corresponds to step 3 in the Hull steps, the mapping and survey. And I see in looking her up, her current research interests include the transmission of architectural and urban ideas, specifically focusing on port cities. So thank you, Carola. If you could set your screen up, please.
Yeah, thank you very much for the invitation, and thanks a lot for the organization. I think you can launch the presentation unless you would prefer me to do so. I did send it through, but I can also share it from my end. Can I?
Darinia, which
yes, you can.
Yeah, I can share. I think you can see it now, right? Then, if that's okay.
Yes, that's great. Yes. Thank you.
And I may have to put it on full screen. How do I do this? Okay, I think you should now be seeing it in full screen here. Yes. So thank you very much for the invitation again. What I would like, and we've heard a lot of wonderful case studies already, I would like to add to those by thinking about the methodology on how to bring those, how to analyze them in a consistent and comparative way. So when we look, for example, at the place that you are, or some of you are in, and I would love to visit, I think there are some network aspects that we also have to take into account. So we've been focusing on specific.
Excuse me, Carola, we didn't see your presentation.
Oh,
the screen is blank.
Yes, the screen is blank. Maybe next slide.
Go back again one more time.
Mm-hmm. Do you need our assistance? We can share from our end. We will share from our end if you don't mind.
And now you are on mute. If you could unmute yourself.
Yes, okay, thank you. Good. Apologies for that. So what I would like to talk about is a way how we can make the analysis of all these World Heritage sites comparable and methodological. Uh-oh, what's going on now? Now this is completely messed up as a presentation. Do I only see a complete mix of images, or do you all see that?
Yes, it's a mix. Sorry, one moment, please. Maybe try from your end.
Okay, let's try one more time from my end. I've brought it up now.
Try again, please.
Yeah, but you have to go out first, otherwise I cannot share. You stop sharing, there we go. Okay, that looks better. At least on my end, yes, I'm seeing it now.
Yes.
Yes, yes.
There we go. Okay, one more try at this. So we're looking for a way how to make the analysis of heritage sites comparable and find ways to explore them in a methodological way. And one thing that I would like to add on first is to say, how can we look at these heritage sites not only as specific objects, but also in the context of a larger network theme. And the network theme that I'm interested in is water. So to tie buildings, urban structures, heritage sites into the larger network of their water relations. For example, port cities around the world have always responded to the same types of containers, to the same types of practices, to similar people traveling the world and interacting with local cities. So that's the theme that we have been exploring, and water in particular in relation to heritage is a theme that is multifaceted. We're talking about drinking water, flooding, issues of drainage, sewage, ground sinkage, but also drought. So trying to use this lens of water to interconnect various heritage sites, heritage urban sites, and I think that's very much in line with what the HUL is also doing. So connecting water and heritage means connecting two very different fields. The water field is moving very fast. It's also an SDG, as it's all about sustainable development goals, and it has been so for a long time. As I said, it's about fresh and salt water, so it's about shipping as much as it's about drinking water, and you see a list of all the fields where water is relevant, including defense, energy, agriculture, consumption, and all of these things. So,
excuse me, Carola, please choose English channel. Is everybody hearing well?
Yes.
We can hear. We can hear.
It's okay.
Okay, so excuse me.
So sorry about that. So what we are trying to do is bring together the investigation of the water sector with that of the heritage sector, and to do that in an interconnected way. Because we can learn from water heritage on the practices, how people have, well, used water in the past, engaged with water in the past in sustainable ways. A couple of books have already come out on this topic, on water and deltas, water heritage, and also looking at it in terms of how we can develop this for the future. So we're talking about various levels of water, sweet and shipping water. And what we've been developing now is a data wheel. We've been calling it, for this purpose of the water wheel. And the idea behind this wheel is that we, in a systematic way, will collect data from archives, standardize it, get it into specific patterns of data. So whether it's a JPEG or whatever, it's GIS data, are you using ArcGIS, are you using QGIS? There's all kinds of different technologies that are being used to specify the data. This data then needs to be prepared in the correct ways to be used and analyzed. So we're talking about ways to analyze geodata from a quantitative and a qualitative perspective. And this is an area where also the computer scientists can bring in their expertise, whether we are working with crowdsourcing technology or even with artificial intelligence. And just to give you one example, we're trying to use artificial intelligence to read historic maps and translate them automatically into georeferenced documents, because all these historical maps are very different in their well, they're not always correct. So you usually need 2 or 3 of these maps to actually have a data point that is GIS referenced. And so that we can make these abstractions of the maps that can then help us visualize specific themes of the geodata. And that produces new types of maps which can then enter this entire circle and be reused for future generations of historians and preservationists. Ideally, once we start preparing these mapping bases, we can use them for different themes. Imagine one person is looking at a church and we'll find a network of religious buildings across the city. Another person can look at a different theme, and in the end, we can cross this kind of data to have it come together. So in our project, in which we look at port cities in particular, we're trying to see what role path dependence and water culture play in port city development. And so the question there is, how can we bring in the heritage component in this water and culture network? And I think what is important to me also to point out is that we are looking not only at World Heritage sites, but at heritage on a larger scale in the built environment, that we are looking from object to network, from preservation to reuse, and from description to making it part of what we are actually living, and so to taking it out from the academic to the public level, and using the power of big data to create this port city culture, including for major ports. And the pilot studies that we've been now doing, to give you a bit more of an idea of what we've been working on, is we've been using 3 port cities, Rotterdam, Hamburg, and London, to identify the relationship between water and land, and to study, and between port and city, and to map these relationships in a standardized way using georeferenced data. And so you can do that on the same scale, changing over time. You can do it in a same time scale, looking at it from different scales. So for example, not only looking at the waterfront, but also at the regional scale. You could, for example, say, where did the wheat come from in the 1300s? And how far did the port reach into the hinterland? Or you could say, how did the waterfront from 1300 change until today? What we've currently done in mapping is take a perspective to see how far the port city is anchored in its region. And these are some examples of the maps, and I'm happy to share the link to the publications where you can see them more closely. The idea here is to see what's the relationship between port and city, and why does a Rotterdam or a Hamburg or a London make different decisions. And that is also extending to heritage, for example. What we are finding is that in Hamburg, where we've mapped also the institutions, is that port and city always stay together under the same institutional realm, which makes the city much stronger in relation to the port. So in terms of heritage, if you think about the Hafen city Hamburg, that is something that can evolve in a city with very strong institutions all on the city side. In the case of Rotterdam, we have, we basically see the port running away from the city, and the city trying to catch up with other urban forms here, like The Hague, farther away from the port itself. So there, the main actor remains the port, which is much stronger than the city, versus in London, where we see the private actors getting land that is far beyond the city and also out of the institutional and legal control of the city. So the docklands, which we see here in black, what's important is that they were built as a sign of port activities when England was ruling the world, but the design that was made continues to be active in even today in the rewriting of the docklands into a heritage site. So this type of mapping, if we can make that a shared foundation, we should be able to see shared practices such as those of the ports in diverse cities. We heard the presentation of Naples. You could think about how did Naples react to those same technological and other changes that a Hamburg, Rotterdam, or London did, or how did river ports react to those changes. So in just to conclude, the goal, I think, for what we are trying to do is to develop a big data-based approach to the understanding of historic transformations of heritage, to do that from a long-term perspective on multiple scales and bringing in the diverse actors. And in this case, I've presented it to you around the theme of water networks, but you could do the same thing for religious networks or other types of networks to identify how a building was linked in its space over time and how these relationships have changed. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Carola. That was just wonderful. Interesting, so many interesting things to think about. And it's wonderful, actually, that you've mentioned those three cities, Rotterdam, Hamburg, and London. And we are now going to hear our second speaker from this topic, Patricia Alberth, who is from the city of Hamburg, and who I met in Chiang Mai last year. So hello, Patricia, again. Nice to see you. Now, Patricia will be talking about traditional knowledge as an integral part of sustainable urban heritage at the Old Town of Hamburg. And I think of Patricia actually a lot in referencing back the Hull model, step 6, about priority actions and projects, because one of the things that has so impressed me with Patricia's work when I've met her previously and heard her speak, is just the projects and the practical examples in the Old Town that she's been involved with. So I look forward to hearing from you, Patricia. If you could now open your screen. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Liz, and good morning to Kiev. Thank you for the invitation. And also congratulations from Bamberg to Kiev on the 30th anniversary of your World Heritage Site. Yes, my presentation will be rather practical. I'll talk about the traditional knowledge as an integral part of sustainable urban heritage. And I would like to start by giving you some background to contextualize my presentation. We're now moving to Germany, to the north of Bavaria. Bamberg is a city of around 78,000 inhabitants. Within a normal year, 7 million visitors, whereof 750,000 of them stay overnight. This year, like for all of us, things were a bit different, but I hope the situation will recover next year. What is special about Bamberg? We have over 1,400 monuments and also free urban spaces that are part of the World Heritage Site. I'll show you some landmarks which you might be familiar with. This is the old town hall of Bamberg in the middle of the river. This is the Bamber Cathedral, which already represents the importance of traditional knowledge, because it shows that without human skills, human knowledge, you cannot create cultural heritage, and also you cannot maintain it. We have a stonemasons workshop that takes around 40 years to set up their structures around the cathedral, to renovate, to restore what needs to be restored. But that's not what I want to talk about today. I would like to take you to a different part of our city, to the Market Gardeners district, which usually you won't see because it's hidden behind private houses. You can see here from this bird's view perspective that you have those fields, small scale fields, partly intersected by small stone walls that create a microclimate for the cultivation of the plants. But those fields are hidden behind those buildings. So only if you manage to get through one of those gates, you can see what kind of gem we have there in the middle of the city. This is from when you manage to cross one of those gates. This is a traditional market gardener. But as you have seen from above, also many of those fields have fallen fallow because the gardeners or the owners say it's too much work, it's not worth it, it's all small scale gardening, I cannot sell it at a high price, but a lot of effort has to go into it in order to produce vegetables here in the middle of the city. So our constant effort goes to inspiring people to use those fields either privately or for market gardening purposes, also trying to support the gardeners in many ways, because they face obstacles like high water prices, lack of parking place for their customers in front of the door. So it's a constant struggle to keep those fields in use, especially in view of high development pressure within the city. One look into the past, we have here photography of 1907. Those are the historical layers of the city, with some gardeners trying to sell their cabbage on the Bamberg market. Tough women who also contributed to the work within the city, in comparison to much more friendly faces today. From around 500 gardening families, we're now down to 20-30 families who have a joint association to market their produce under one local label. We also have a very strong social dimension in terms of traditional costumes, in terms of local dialect, and religious processions in which the gardeners regularly participate. And also the recultivation of certain plants that have almost been abandoned, such as licorice, which had a very strong position in Bamberg until the 1960s, when China produced or started to produce licorice at a very low price, and Bamberg lost its competitiveness. But on the right-hand side, if you look at our city map, that is the oldest one we have, dating back to 1602, you can see that this tradition of licorice cultivation is very deeply rooted, because on the bottom, as part of the city map, you see 2 root rings of those licorice plants. They were, if you would like, so the logos of Bamberg. And just recently we have restarted cultivating licorice, although of course it's not competitive anymore, but it's some kind of tourist souvenir. And a recent achievement, last year we opened our new visitor center just in the middle of the city on a little islet. And of course the gardening tradition, which by the way is also part of the national list of intangible cultural heritage. That gardening tradition here has been integrated into the exhibition as it plays such an important role in the conservation of our world heritage. And that's one positive aspect that Corona brought this year. We clearly noticed that our citizens got much more aware of the importance of local food production, the importance of sustainability, of short transport ways, and that gave a lot of support to our gardeners, which I hope will continue in the future. And in connection with what Carlo mentioned with their sustainability profile, we are now trying to set up an SDG dashboard for our city, where we have real-time indicators on how the city is performing as a base for future decisions to develop the place for the people and for sustainability. That brings me to the end of my presentation. Thank you for your attention.
Thank you very much, Patricia. You've all been wonderful about keeping to time. One of the things I would have loved to look at more closely was your image of your completed information building, which it looked like it's beautifully incorporating traditional skills and approach to contemporary architecture, but using mixture of traditional materials. Thank you so much for that. I love the idea of the SDG dashboard as well for your communication with the city. We now move on to theme 4, inclusion and participation. I've been so enjoying the various discussions we've been having from the case studies. Particularly Johannes mentioned, as a stakeholder involvement, I think really contributed to this theme about inclusion and participation, which really aligns with step 7 in the whole steps about the importance of partnership within the local management structure. And I did love, Patricia, then just your social activities, which obviously included residents and involved the participation of various stakeholders in your magical city. So our first speaker in this theme is Ms. Katarzyna Petrowska. Excuse me, I haven't pronounced that correctly, who is head of the World Heritage Centre National Board of Poland and the focal point for World Heritage participation for World Heritage Sustainable Management. If you would like to share your screen, thank you.
Thank you, Elizabeth. I thought to myself that as I am speaking about participation.
Sorry, if I could interrupt. We are hearing German or Russian sound alongside. I don't know if it's on me or somebody else.
It's also on me too. Yeah.
Yeah. Sorry, it's a technical problem. We just need to fix that for a second. Irina, could we request some help with that?
One moment, please.
Okay, let's try. Go ahead.
Excuse me for this inconvenience. We are trying to solve this problem. And now, is it okay?
Oh, I shall say something. So
yes, that sounds good. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Good afternoon to everyone, and I am very grateful for the invitation to this conference. I consider myself as an advocate of every single word which is in the title of the conference, individually and all together. So I'm very keen to be here. As I am speaking about participation, I thought it's better not to have a presentation, so I don't have a PowerPoint. As I'm talking about people, I wanted all of us to concentrate on ourselves being a group of people involved in heritage protection. As I supposed, everyone speaking before and after me will touch participation in heritage protection in one way or another. If we are speaking about cross-sectoral cooperation or projects, if we are speaking about regional development, heritage protection, bringing different various actors together is just a must. Let's return to the work. There is one thing which is very important. Participation is a very discussed subject. There is a lot of written reports. There are a lot of guidance. There are a lot of different initiatives. You can Google the internet. There is a lot of information popping up. There is hardly any international strategy, policy document, or any plan which doesn't refer to importance of participatory approach. Also, when we speak about World Heritage Convention, even in 1972, there was a strong reference to giving function of heritage in the life of the community and integration of heritage protection into comprehensive planning programs. It was already mentioned by Michael, and it all has to be done in a protection, conservation, presentation, transmission to future generations. It all has to be done forever. It means that we must take a long-term perspective. In the operational how to do it, in the operational guidelines, which is our Bible, it is said that we should do it in a collaborative management, through the collaborative management system. In the urban context, simplifying a little bit, we are dealing with individual monuments or groups of buildings, and we are dealing with urban sites. Both of them are located in an urban setting, which means that we are dealing with activity of many actors of different status, of different character, of different power, and we are dealing with a very dynamic environment. If we add to individual monuments and urban sites buffer zones, it adds a little bit to the challenge which we have. Depending on the nature and structure of World Heritage Site and the way it is organized, the objectives and mechanism of participation may and will vary. But what is participatory or inclusive management? Some dictionary says that it's the practice of empowering members of a group, such as employees of a company, partners or stakeholders in the management or citizens of a community to participate in decision making within the organizational system. Having World Heritage Sites and the organization in mind, we may talk about active participation in a day-to-day functioning of World Heritage Site, which usually means opening up to initiatives and creating a friendly atmosphere for employees and partners and for local community members and groups to take actions. We also speak about participation in decision-making at the planning level. This is usually submission of proposals and consultations in the special planning process, which is usually regulated by the law. But we also speak about participation in decision-making and the strategic level, and that level is the level of a management plan, which each World Heritage property should have. And the management plan is important not only at the strategic level, but it's also important when we speak about day-to-day functioning or the special planning processes, because it collects and guides the actions in a long-term perspective. The management planning is also important because public participation is a process. It's not a single event. It consists of a series of activities and actions over a full lifespan of a project, and the project can vary, depends on what you want to achieve, to both inform the public and stakeholders and obtain input from them. And this process has to be, there are key steps in the planning process of the participation. First of all, you should, or the agency which runs the process has to organize itself for participation and has to dedicate right amount of attention and time for the process. It's a time-consuming thing. It's nothing that can happen very quickly. Has to identify and get to know the stakeholders, has to pick an appropriate level of public participation. We may inform, consult, involve, collaborate, or empower. It depends on the project. Depends on what is going to be achieved or what we want to achieve. It should also integrate public participation in the decision process. This is very important, that there is a feedback from the process and the engagement of stakeholders and public into the management, and also has to match public participation tools to objectives throughout the process as such. My experience comes mostly from leading or coordinating nomination processes. It's quite an easy in comparison to managing sites which are already on the World Heritage List. There is a big carrot in front of people who are in the process. These processes were started both by local community-based associations, local museums, but also by state and regional governments. And just a few things from my own experience. The participation is possible and actions taken bring satisfaction to participants and quality sustainable changes, because we are speaking about that this is our aim in many situations, to change attitudes if we think about sustainable development or the way people use the heritage. So the first and the most important thing is information. Information about the process and information needed for the sound participation in the process must reach stakeholders and key local community groups and individuals. Many processes fail because of lack, because the information never reached those who were supposed to enter the process. The second thing, the local community and stakeholders must be ready and willing to get involved, because they must be ready and willing, and that's a huge subject to talk about. Not every society is ready to get involved. There is not always experience to do so. So sometimes the community or the stakeholders must be prepared. The third thing, actions must be given a goal. We must do it for something, and people should know why we involve them in the process. And long-term activities must be divided into stages. These processes are usually quite lengthy, so it's very important to give them a kind of dynamic and let people to see results along it. There must be also there is also a very important thing like conditions and rules of participation. They must be clear from the very beginning, and they must be well communicated. The process must be transparent to be credible, and that's through the whole process. It's really important, as we are talking about trust, as we are talking about building relations. I was talking about time, and there is the sixth most important thing from my perspective is that those who start and lead the process must be professionally prepared and must have the skills. Because if taken seriously, it's not an easy process. It's rewarding, but it's not easy at all. So just to some closing remarks. Participation relates directly to human needs and expectations, is intellectually, emotionally, physically, and also financially demanding. And therefore, it has to be well prepared and very responsibly run. Otherwise, it may result in withdrawal from cooperation of those without whom the protection and conservation of World Heritage properties will not be effective. The key in the process affecting the process outcomes is a management system, which has to be embedded in a management strategy or a plan that sets directions and rules. The implementation of the management plan justifies and rationalizes the actions taken, and from this perspective is also very important. So in addition to will of the society to participate and will of the leading agency to take this approach, and skills, management plan is key in the process. And to be effective, the World Heritage Site Management Plan must sit in the national legal system and local regulations. Without this, every participatory process, although obviously not without significance, even small actions are very important, will have an action like one of character, and will probably will not have a visible influence on the decisions made. Well, just to one sentence to end up, this year showed clearly how important empowering of local communities and stakeholders is, how people impact the environment and how important relations between people and heritage, but also between people themselves are. Let's hope we are learning the lesson, and the future management of World Heritage property will be even with better and more planned and more targeted participation of stakeholders and especially local communities. Thank you very much.
Oh, gosh, thank you very much. That was a very broad coverage of many of the issues. And whilst the issue of demolition control in World Heritage inscribed places might not be the same threat as in other urban heritage systems, I find that the participation process often needs to resort to the power of social media when the community feels cornered and powerless. And I think the point that you make about the practice of empowering the community in the decision making, I think it comes apart when we're faced with the crunch of loss of our heritage. I'm embroiled in that at the moment in my city in Adelaide with a current demolition, and that's when the power of social media in terms of participation of the community can become a lifesaver. But look, thank you very much. That was a very generous and broad coverage of the issues. And now if we move on to Ruza Kovacevic-Bilic, I hope I have that correct, the pronunciation again, the Deputy Mayor from the historic city of Trogir in Croatia. In my internet research of you, Ruza, I actually stumbled on your Facebook page and I saw many similar posts about cities and places that I often put up. So I'll look forward very much to hearing you. Thank you.
Thank you for, did I share the screen?
Yes, please.
Yes, please.
Just a second. Is my presentation showing?
It is, yes, thank you.
I don't see it, so. Thank you very much for the introduction. Thank you for have the honor to participate in this event today. In today's presentation, I will present the three projects that the city of Trogir in the cultural and historical heritage development from the last few years, with special emphasis on participatory practices in the decision-making process that we made. Let me first present my city with some general information. The city of Trogir is a small town with a great history. The beginning of settlements are visible from prehistoric time. We have findings from 45,000 years BC, while the oldest finds of urban continuity date back to 2000 years BC. Experts and historians agree that the city of Trogir did not arise out of necessity, but out of a decision, naturally the most suitable place to live in Adriatic coast. Throughout the classic period, the Middle Ages, and till the modern age, Trogir was a miniature town, both in size and appearance, and yet it looks like a large castle on the water. Administratively, Trogir has eight smaller settlements, like a small part of towns, covering 39 square kilometers and even 4 islands. The old town core is a small island itself. The island of Chiovo, a part of island Chiovo, belongs to Trogir, and 2 small islands, Drvenik, big and small, Belima. This is a picture of Trogir on last year's Christmas Eve. It was 22 degrees in the air, so it's just a teaser for you. In 1997, the Trogir Old Town was inscribed on UNESCO World Heritage List due to exceptionally well-preserved old town that shows preserved urban continuity over a long historical period with minimal modern interventions in urban space. When we talk about the Old Town, we should point out three types of objects that mark the city, primarily its fortifications, towers, walls, and the city gates. Then sacred buildings, churches, bell towers, and monasteries, as well as palaces, villas, and lodges. In the next few slides, I will present just a few of the most prominent ones. The most impressive fortification object is our fortress Camerlengo, built 600 years ago. It's built at the southwest corner of the island in the shape of irregular trapezoid with the 4 towers at the corners. Camerlengo Fortress is open to visitors, and the number shows that even 80% of visitors of city of Trogir visits Fortress Camerlengo during the tourist season. At the summer, it hosts numerous concerts, performances, and film screenings. About the other fortifications, I will point out the Tower of St. Mark, city walls, south and the north gates, and 2 city lodges. The specificity of the southern city gates is that they are decorated with original wooden doors. Among the numerous sacred buildings in the area of the Old Town, the most recognizable is the Cathedral of St. Florence, a masterpiece of art created for a full 5 centuries. Inside of it, we should emphasize the Chapel of St. John and the Master Radovan portal. Within the numerous palaces and villas in the old city, dominates the palace of the former noble family Garaim Fanfonia, today's city museum. The museum contains a rich historical collection of artifacts, lapidary with in situ display of urban layers from prehistory to the late Roman period. Also, we keep valuable work of world artists and sculptures and the richest private library in this part of the country. I'll continue with the main part of the presentation about participatory practices in heritage management through our 3 main projects. The largest of them is project of renovation and reconstruction of towers, walls, and city gates, with complete urban documentation. The second one is the city branding project, which includes additional valorization of heritage through raising a share of cultural tourism in Trogir. And the third one is a participatory budgeting project through which we can see the specifics of perception of heritage from the perspective of local inhabitants. In all 3 projects, we have incorporated the participation of the public, key stakeholders, and local people to raise awareness of the importance of heritage for our city. Also involve local people in shaping the space, as well as in the decision-making process on spending their money, budget money of the city, local administration. First project is called the Stone Encyclopedia. Is recently completed project of building project documentation for the reconstruction and arrangement of 7 key locations in the city, with an urban solution of the whole western part of the Old Town core. The project was funded by EU funds with about 800,000 euros and lasted for 3 years. This is an extensive documentation of the reconstruction of the Camerlengo Tower, the Tower of St. Mark, city walls, city gates, and the Marshal Marmont Monument, with then all experts investigations of the sites. Since its construction 600 years ago, a partial renovation in the 1950s. No investments in these facilities have been made till today, nor has any physical planning documentation existed for the complete development of this area. Numerous experts from the fields of archaeology, history, restoration were engaged around this project, where in the case of Camerlengo Tower, the static of the building and the constructive restoration were crucial. Exceptional importance in this project was the development of architectural urban design of the entire western area of the old town called Bataria. Also, a management plan was developed in cooperation with all key stakeholders in public institutions and the civil sector in order to make heritage management as inclusive possible and acceptable for the local population. These are images of the conceptual design that was awarded in the competition of urban solution. The second project we started in 2018 is the project of branding the city of Trogir with the aim of raising the level of cultural tourism and sustainable management of resources that we have as a local administration, but also a businessman whose main branch is tourism. Given the previously highlighted features of Trogir, the brand strategy has been guided by the urban continuity of the city from the earliest history to the present day. Sorry. So we to the present day. So we wanted to emphasize the modern way of the life in the city now today. So the work of world sculptures in Trogir and traces marks in stone that we found is something that the city of Trogir distinguishes from the other Mediterranean destinations. The combinations of historical and contemporary creativity has led to the creation of the new visual identity and narrative for new period of development. After the analysis, we developed a new brand, new logo, narrative visual solutions that will highlight every resident of Trogir and every tourism worker as a brand holder or brand ambassador. In the years to come, we plan to implement all phases of the new brand strategy and engage every aspect to the city policy. The third project is a participatory budgeting program we called You've Been Asked To, or I Tebe Se Pita. We have implementing this project since 2018, and its goal is to enable citizens to directly create a part of the city budget. Citizens are invited to propose projects for 8 local committees and then vote for their favorites to decide which of them will be realized next year. These projects showed great success in the first year, not only in the implementation, but in building the relationship with citizens.
Запитати, в формі ви долучитеся в Zoom чи в медіа-центр приїдете? Чи зможете взагалі? Так.
Sorry.
Так.
Can I continue?
Yes, not sure what happened there.
Sorry.
Yes, keep going. Just a couple more minutes, then your time's up.
Okay, sorry.
Thank you.
We built a special relationship with our citizens, the higher level of direct communication, as well as building mutual trust on spending the public money. Citizens of the Old Town Core have about 20,000 euros per year at their disposal, and the most common proposals are problems with parking places, arranging city parks, reconstruction of all the cobbled streets, frequent flooding in the Old Town Core, supervision, safety, and setting up a public fountain on the waterfront. that's the problems that our citizens see as the most important to them, and our job is to realize their proposals for the next year. So this was a short presentation of our projects related to sustainable heritage development and inclusive for our citizens and visitors. The next steps are to continue these projects until full implementation and to maximize the budget for programs for involving citizens in the creation of the content in their city and the budget we made. Instead of saying goodbye, I will say thank you once more for participation. And in the end, I left this short promotional video of Trogir, which shows all the projects we mentioned in one. Just a second.
Thank you very much. I apologize. Were you planning now to show a video? Because I think we're a little bit short of time.
Aha, I will then stop it.
Yes, if we could.
We'll share all the presentations, and
okay.
The participants will have opportunity to see the video, because I'm sorry, but
I realized that we are short of time. Okay.
Yes, and I personally would really love to see the video, so we will be able to do that in separate time. Thank you so much. Wonderful, comprehensive approach to your beautiful looking city. Thank you very much. I love the idea of the Stone Encyclopedia. Also, your emphasis on modest funding, responding to people's needs, you described at the end. Fantastic. So our final speaker now, still on the topic of inclusion and participation, and as both speakers so far have said how important this is Manana Vadzelashvili, I hope I have that right, head of UNESCO and International Relations Unit, National Agency for Cultural Heritage Preservation of Georgia, focal point for World Heritage Convention. And the topic that she is talking about is formation and development of Mushketa World Heritage Property Inclusive Management System. Thank you, Manana.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much for inviting me to the panel. I just one minute to improve. Is the screen shared from my side? Do you see the screen?
Yes, it's okay.
Yes, it's up.
Yes, it's okay.
We do.
Visible.
Great.
Yes, thank you. We do.
Great. Thank you very much. A minute. So from the outset, thank you very much for inviting me to this very interesting panel of experts, and I would like to send my very sincere compliments to the host of the event to the very complicated time, very hard time of lockdown of COVID pandemic. They managed to organize this online session. I would like also to congratulate with the 30th anniversary of inscription into the World Heritage List, the Santa Sofia Cathedral and Kiev Pечерsk Lavra. My sincere congratulations to my Ukrainian colleagues. From the outset, I would like to mention that all presentations are very interesting and useful, to be sure. And I would like to particularly thank my colleague Katarzyna from Poland, who opened our thematic session with the general guidelines and prepared us for particular samples to be shared, dedicated to the inclusive management system related to the World Heritage sites. My sample for reviewing today or for sharing is the Mushketa World Heritage site, the site that is for most of you, our colleagues, is very much acquainted and very much known. If you remember, the Mushketa World Heritage site has been inscribed into the World Heritage List according to the criteria 3 and 4, while the integrity of the site is conditioned by the harmonic interaction of the distinguished architectural monuments of medieval with the historic landscape of ancient capital of Treta, place of the confluence of two rivers. So you can see the slides, some slides of this place, the beautiful monuments, and withdrawn within the beautiful historical landscapes. And the water mentioned by a colleague from Hong Kong is very crucial to think and to rethink the role of water within this, for this World Heritage Site. So far, the preservation of this traditional urbanity of the city, as well as the historical natural landscape of surroundings, is one of the most crucial issues of almost 2 decades for the state party and subject of serious consideration of the World Heritage Committee and its advisory bodies. So, unfortunately, I don't know why. Okay. So it's the one of the beautiful views of Treta. And here you can see the brief considerations provided by the World Heritage Committee of different years related to the Treta World Heritage Site. Due to the hardship time, it was inscribed in World Heritage in Danger from 2009, including 2017. Now we are lucky that we are withdrawn from this list of danger, while the problems are still these challenges. We have still very heavy challenges to complete the building of the elaborating of the proper management system of this site. In line with the elaboration of the special development plan and building guidelines that is continuing for the last 5 years, the formation of the sustained management system is the main issue in our institutional agenda. This is a very comprehensive and long process that requires the continuous dedication and commitment from all involved stakeholders. The debates, disputes, sometimes disagreements and misunderstandings are an integral part of this process of formation of the management system. And why it's so complicated and controversial? So it should be grouped the top controversial interests of the future of Treta. Local common citizens whose constitutional rights are frequently used by others for some speculations. The interest of patriarchate, who envisage the ancient capital of Treta as a most important spiritual place of Christianization of Georgia, and would like to subordinate all other possibilities to this main idea. New Richmond, for whom Treta is an attractive place for their residences and businesses as well. While the all involved parties declare that the outstanding universal values of Treta, historic monuments, are the most important and basic precondition for any kind of development plan, the interpretation and understanding of those values are absolutely different. The cross-interest of different stakeholders is a rather big challenge, and harmonization of these visions are rather complicated. Includes the lack of professional knowledge and institutional abilities that frequently cause the wrong decisions should be accounted as a main task at all levels of the management of Treta recently. So far, the World Heritage Center and its advisory bodies during the years continuously work with national authorities and all involved stakeholders at local and national level to assist the relevant institutions in growing up the abilities and developing instruments towards improvement of the management system of Treta property based on the participatory approach. One of the outputs of this valuable support is the establishment of the Georgian World Heritage Protection Council at the National Agency for Cultural Heritage Preservation of Georgia in March 2020. The council is in charge of reviewing all project proposals or interventions within the Georgian World Heritage properties and their buffer zones. Alongside, so you can see on the screen, you can see the members of this council, and alongside with the experts from National Agency for Cultural Heritage Preservation of Georgia, representatives from all the stakeholders, municipalities, Patriarchate of Georgia, Ministry of Infrastructure and Regional Development, Ministry of Education, Science Culture and Sport of Georgia, as well as the specialists from the professional institutions, ICOMOS Georgia, National Center for Cultural Heritage Studies, and etc., and independent experts are involved as members of the council. Decisions are mandatory for the Director General while issuing the relevant legal act. The building guidelines and historic cultural reference plan, alongside with the National Law on Cultural Heritage and World Heritage Committee decisions, are the main methodological documents for reviewing the project proposals by the council. According to the law on cultural heritage of Georgia, the proposals for any kind of intervention on cultural heritage monument are directly submitted to the national agency for obtaining relevant permissions for works, while any kind of development within the protection or buffer zones are submitted to the municipality. And since municipality revised the documentation, sent the package of the national agency for reviewing. According to the, it should be also mentioned that according to the World Heritage Committee 42, all project proposals on any kind of intervention within the buffer zone of threat World Heritage property should be submitted to the World Heritage Center for the ICOMOS reviewing. So that means that all projects afterwards, after the positive decision at the national level, are submitting to the World Heritage Center, and there's a very big number of documentation. So from April, I would like to share with you with some statistics from April 1. It was when it was the first Council of World Heritage in Georgia. The 93 project proposals have been submitted to the National Agency for evaluation, while 50 proposals were back to the municipality for resubmission due to the lack of required documentation. That reveals the lack of professional abilities of local staff on the and on the commitment of the Council of Permanent Consultative Meetings. The World Heritage Council expressed their full commitment to arrange a number of consultative meetings with the local staff of Treta municipality. And since May, when we have small break from the lockdown condition in Georgia, we started
Excuse me, Manana. Excuse me, your 10 minutes is now, you're now finished your time allocation. Have you got 1 minute to wrap up?
Okay, I have very small to say, very few words to say. So so we have continuous work with the local staff, and despite that a very short time passed since the Georgian World Heritage Council started its working, the consultation meetings have already revealed its possible impact on the improvement of the documentation submitted to the national agency. Moreover, the commitment and willingness from the municipality to constructive collaboration is rapidly increased, while we are well aware that to sustain and the already achieved results, we still need to be more patient for further activated our sources for step-by-step building the sustainable and proper system for World Heritage property management that should ensure the adequate preservation of the OUV of distinguished heritage site and create the favorable condition for the local citizens for well-being. So thank you very much. I am completing.
Okay, thank you so much. I appreciate that. You must understand, in fact, all of us must understand time has run away.
Yeah.
And for that reason, I'd like to thank all the people in the session that I've chaired very much for your contribution. It's been very, very worthwhile. And I will now be handing over to Jody to do a summary and a wrap up. Thank you all so much. I appreciate it.
Excuse me, one more point. I would like to ask you before we move to sum up to switch on cameras of speakers to make a group photo.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Групповое фото.
do that?
Да, уже подключилась.
Ooh.
Ну, давайте те, кто есть в живых.
Okay, is that all? Сейчас.
Thank you very much. Is
Thank
that
you.
done, Darina?
Yes, Jody, the floor is yours to sum up our exciting meeting.
Thank you very much. Actually, the papers have been so tremendous that I don't know that I have a lot to add, or it's quite complex to summarize. I'm going to ask instead, since we had to cut out the discussion times allotted for each of the sessions, I'm going to ask Mike and Liz to give us 3 key takeaways from each of the sessions. So that would, I don't think we have time for really question and answer. Everybody's probably looking at their lunch and wanting to run away. So Mike, first I want to ask you for 3 key takeaways, if you could, please.
Oh, thank you, Jody. So my first takeaway is the importance of interdisciplinarity and the importance of thinking outside the silo. So the historic urban landscape is beyond the historic ensemble, not just physically, but socially, economically, and environmentally. My second one is that it's people and it's small, effective steps. We saw everybody having small activities, which made such a big difference to what we have. My third point is resilience for COVID-19. And I think it's not just for COVID-19, that was just a wake-up call. And it's to be a little bit more humble and to be understanding much more about sustainability and to actually generate solutions which are diverse and multiple. In other words, that resilience, in my mind, is based on the redundancy theory, that if we have lots of other things, lots of options, then we become more resilient. And I think this is an important part. And I thank you all for flagging all these issues. I hope I've done justice to the 5 presentations which I had this morning. Over.
Okay, I'll add my 3 takeaway points. I've really appreciated those cities where they've done some benchmarking against the SDG goals, because I think this issue about accountability, I keep thinking about why are we doing this? We're essentially doing this because the planet's in crisis. We've set ourselves a goal of 2030 for us all to respond to these goals. So I think the first one is that I've really appreciated the variety of formats that people have benchmarked themselves against those goals. The second one is I can't help myself as an architect to always enjoy and respond to specific examples of design within cities. We really only saw 2 today. One was in Bordeaux and one was in Hamburg. And this is an area that I always like to explore further, and I'm hoping we might do this further, is just how do we manage interventions, new interventions into an existing historic environment, because it's such a subjective issue, but just so important. And then I think the third one that I pick up, and it does relate to COVID, I think we've learned a big lesson about communication and making it possible for a wide number of people to join in a discussion which doesn't cost us anything. And of course, we'd love to be in Kiev. And congratulations for your 30-year anniversary. And I would love to be walking around. But I've seen beautiful photos of your city, and I've heard and I've seen interactions from about 68 people. And I just find that now thrilling that we can have these very embracing discussions across the world. And here I am right at the other side, ready to go to bed. Inclusive discussions across a broad number of people. And I'd just like to thank you all for your contributions, because I have learned so much. It's just been fantastic.
Thank you very much. Indeed, I think it's been a tremendous learning experience to hear the specific actions that are being undertaken by cities in particular at a local level. And also, I think some of the conceptual thinking, I think it's very rich and very meaningful. And we do need more reflection and more exchange, experiences exchanged about World Heritage and sustainable development. I think that we don't speak enough at the local level. It tends to be often a very much more national policy level. And I think it's very, very meaningful to bring it down to actions in this way. And it's very enriching. I want to thank Darina Nedzelskaya very much and the whole team of Kiev who have been working on this together very closely with the World Heritage Center, and I would be very remiss to not thank the team here who's been working hard also, Alba Zarbide, Termila Vigneshwar, Anata, and Carlota Mariwan, who have been all working very hard along with Darina. In fact, Kiev's proposal, Darina's proposal in the beginning was to have the event in Kiev, as you said, have a really nice event there. But of course, since everything changed, we hope that this, as I understood, Darina, this is the first part, and that we will be putting together a publication where we can actually gather all of these case studies and more, and have another possibly a longer conference, maybe in person if things transform next year. And that would be the way that we can actually consolidate some of this. So we absolutely look forward to having all of that. Before we let everybody go, we had one other quick thing that we thought might be fun and give you something to as a way to get everybody input. My colleagues, I think Carla is going to bring up on her screen, if you will allow us, a Montimeter. Montimeter has a quick poll, quick survey, so that we can get your reactions to some specific things, which would be very helpful for us to take away from this meeting, because it's been wonderful and it would be very helpful to have your reactions. So the first one, I think, Carla, we need to see just the screen because we're seeing a lot of other things right now. Nice, thank you. So this is the first question, and could you just explain how this works, Carlota?
Yes, hello. So you can just go to www.menti.com and use this code to log in. Sorry, no, I cannot see. Can you see the code at the top?
Yes, we see it.
Okay, perfect.
So if we could request everybody to please go to, don't go away from your Zoom, stay on your Zoom, but just open up this monty.com and use this code. And then.
And you can even do it on your phone. It works quite well. And then you should see this screen where you can vote anonymously, and we will see the results live as you start voting. And here we have the number of people that have voted.
Thank you. We have only one so far, so we need everybody to vote quickly so that we can go forward. Is everybody able to log in and use this? It should be very quick. Can we get at least 10 responses? That'll help us go forward.
Jody, excuse me, due to the lack of time, can we share the link to this questionnaire and ask it not online, but because of the lack of time?
Can people do it later, then
Do it,
send it to us?
later, if you share the link.
Yeah, not a problem. I'll
Okay,
share
we
the
will
link
do
on the
that
chat.
then. There are 3 questions, and if you could just click on this and use this quote and then send us, we will be able to pick up the responses, and that would be very valuable for us going forward. This is the second question and the third one. So there's just 3 questions, and if you could please fill it up, that would be fantastic. With that, I want to thank all people who have helped us, and especially the interpreters and the tech who have been extraordinary making this happen. And many, many thanks again to the city of Kiev and the entire team who have been working to make this possible. And thank you, of course, to the exceptional speakers who have really enriched this enormously. Over to you, Darina. Thank you so much.
Many thanks, dear Jody, and I will save your time, and I join all the thanks that Jody have already said, and really it was a very useful and exciting discussion with excellent speakers, chairs, and all people involved. Owing to you, you make this conference happen in these very extremely difficult conditions of pandemic, and we hope that next year, if the situation in the world allows us, we will make a full format conference, and we are waiting all of you in Kiev personally, in person, and I hope that we will have time for more discussion and questions. So we will share all the materials, questionnaires, and conclusions of our meeting. Many thanks to everybody, and I hope that we will see you next year. Thank you. Goodbye.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye.
Goodbye. Ciao.
Ciao.
Au revoir.
Goodbye.
Ciao.
Bye to all.
You are great.
See you the next year.
Yeah.
Happy holidays to everybody, and a happy new year.
Next year without mask, maybe. Hopefully. Goodbye.
Bye-bye.
Bye. Goodbye.